Good evening. This is the August 2024 meeting of the Town of South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. First of all, I would ask that people do what I'm doing, which is silence your phone. And we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have two public hearings, and the way we will handle those is, first of all, we'll let the applicant present what they're proposing, and then we'll go to town staff. Our Director of Planning, Michelle Leip, will also probably report on any engineering input, and then we will ask for comments from the public, and finally we will ask for the commissioners to ask questions or make comments or whatever, and then if we do close the public hearing, that would be the last opportunity for us to get input from anyone. So you want to make sure that if you have something you need to give us, that we get it tonight, or that we continue the public hearing to another date. So would you be willing to read the notice? Oh, you want to give it to? You can read the notice. You have it. Commissioner Bernstein will read the notice.
To be published in the Journal Inquirer Thursday, August 8th, 2024, and Thursday, August 15th, 2024. South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, August 20th, 2024 at 7 p.m. in Council Chambers of the South Windsor Town Hall to consider the following. Application 24-20P, Boynton Zoning Text Amendment, requests the following modification to the Section 7.15 Senior Residence Regulations, modify Section 7.17.5 Project Units, caps to allow sliding scale increase in units with max of 50 units on properties containing more than 12 buildable acres, modify 7.17.6 density, Section E to allow for either a 1,000 square foot community room or 600 square foot per unit of open space, recreation area, and developments over 20 units, and modify 7.17.7 architectural consideration to allow for maximum unit sizes of 2,400 square feet, limiting the maximum number of units greater than 2,200 square feet to 30%, and a minimum number of units 2,000 square feet or less shall be 30%. Application 24-24P, A1 Glass Re-Subdivision, request for re-subdivision of parcel land into 4 building lots, including a new frontage lot along Petria Road on property located at 251, 255, and 259 Sullivan Avenue, the industrial zone. Copies of the application are on file in the office of the town clerk and our planning department, and online at www.southwindsor-ct.gov/planning department/pages/planning and zoning commission applications. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard, and written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff. Stephen Wagner, Chair, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernstein. So we will now start the public hearing for application 24-20P, the Boynton Zoning Text Amendment. Does the applicant have someone here to speak? Okay, when you do speak, everybody, first of all, there's a sign-in sheet, and then we ask you to introduce yourself.
Thank you.
You have to kind of get the mic close to your face so we can hear you.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. For the record, my name's Dory Famigletti. I'm an attorney at Kahan, Kerensky, and Capicella in Vernon, and I'm representing the Boyntons in connection with this application this evening.
Excuse me, could you spell your last name? I didn't understand.
Yes, it's Famigletti, F as in Frank, A-M-I-G-L-I-E-T-T-I.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you have in front of you an application to amend certain sections of the senior residence development regulations. My clients, Ken Boynton and John Boynton, are interested in developing an SRD in town. The specific property they're interested in is at 186 Foster Street. But really, for purposes of this application, as you know, when you look at a regulation or a text amendment, it could be applicable at anywhere that the zones allow for an SRD. So you can't, at this stage, be looking at a specific site. So I'm just giving you that for informational purposes, but we're really not going to talk about that site in any specific detail. As you know, your regulations allow for a senior residence development with a special exception in any RR, AA30, or A zone. So we have to look at it in that context. It could be applicable to any of those zones. The reasons my clients are proposing these changes is because they feel that the existing regulations as written are a bit restrictive and hinder both the development of new senior residence developments in town, as well as potentially the marketability of senior residence units. And this is based on their experience of many, many years as being home builders. Mr. Boynton has been constructing primarily single-family homes and condominiums in the Vernon, Tolland, Ellington. Have you done anything in South Windsor yet? Have you done anything in South Windsor yet? South Windsor, Manchester. So he in this neck of the woods, he's been developing for many years. So I'm going to take you one by one through the three specific changes that we're proposing and give you the rationale as to why we think that these would be good ideas and allow for more flexibility. And the first change is to section 7.17.5, the project unit caps. Right now, the regulations say that all developments are maxed out at 25 units, so you cannot have more than 25 units in a SRD. In addition, the regulations say that you cannot have more than 350 units in town. That's the total number allowed in town. What we would like to do is provide for a sliding scale based on parcel size. And when we looked at this, we said, why are we limiting, why is the town limiting any senior residence development to 25 units? That could be, depending on the size of the parcel involved, overly restrictive. If you have a vacant parcel available for development in the RR, AA30, or A zones, if it's a large parcel, and if you can still comply with your density requirements of 5 units per acre for multifamily units, 3 per acre for single family, and 4 if you have a mix, then why not be able to consider it? The 25 seemed a little bit arbitrary. Now, we do recognize, because I looked through your regulation, your purpose section of the SRD, and I know it says that you're seeking to promote or foster small senior residence developments that can be nestled into neighborhoods with minimal impacts. But when we qualify it as small, medium, or large, I'm not sure we should be looking exclusively at the number of units. Really, the scale, I think, is what's more important when you're categorizing a small, medium, or a large type of a development, because if you have a 50-acre parcel, 25 units could be very small and very compatible with the surrounding area. If you have a smaller parcel, then it would be more densely developed if you had a high number of units. So I think you really have to look at it in the broader context of the neighborhood in which the development will be built. As I mentioned, 25 units might be a lot for a small 5-acre parcel, but if you've got a 15, 20-acre parcel in an A20 or an A30 zone, then maybe the scale is really not disproportionate too much to what you already have. So that was the rationale there. Also, I wasn't quite sure why the restriction on the 300 cumulative max. According to your director of planning, I think you have around 250 now. So that's not a critical component of this application for us, but in the context of, what does the town want to see developing, and knowing the constraints you have that accompany conventional residential developments that perhaps have more school-aged children, it would seem that a senior residence development would be an attractive type of housing option to have here in town. So, we think that it would be more desirable to not limit yourself to just 350 units. We think that there's a demand and a market for it, and it comes with a less burden, particularly on the schools for your town, than other types of housing units would have. I also call to note your plan of conservation and development does indicate that South Windsor's aging population is about 19% of the town's population is 65 and older, and there's been increases in the town's aging population. And I'm quoting from the plan on page 2-1, where it says, over the next decade, there will be a continued demand for both senior housing and senior services to meet the needs of this large and growing population. So again, I just ask you, why restrict yourself as a town to just 350 units? It's a very small percentage of the total housing units in town. The plan of conservation and development also notes as a goal to provide housing options for seniors and encourage the creation of additional age-restricted housing units. I think those components talk towards maybe either increasing or eliminating the cap. Again, that's not the most integral part or critical part of our proposed regulation in order for my client's particular plan to go forward, but it just seems to make sense and be consistent with your overall plan for the town that you might want to encourage. So we're not just throwing out a cap completely. We, as it was mentioned in the legal and as you can see from the text, we're proposing a sliding scale based on the size of the overall parcels. We have proposed that on parcels up to 8 acres, there'd be a 25-unit cap still. And that would basically work out to be about 3 units per acre, which is in line with your density for single-family units within an SRD. On parcels over 8 and under 12, we've got a 36-unit max, and that's about a density of anywhere between 3 and 4.5 units per acre. Still, again, in line with what you have for your overall densities in an SRD, depending on if you're doing detached, attached, or a mixture. And then on parcels over 12 acres, we still provide for a total unit cap of 50. So in any SRD, you still wouldn't be going over 50, which I know is double what you are now. But if you're looking at it in relation to the scale of the project, in the context of the size of the overall parcel, some parcels may be able to handle that, and it might fit well into the neighborhood, depending on what the surrounding neighborhood is. And that's all stuff you could look at specifically as part of the special exception. So having a 50-unit max on a 12-acre or more parcel, you still have a 4-unit per acre density requirement there, again, which is in line with what your overall density requirements are under your current regulations. So we don't feel it's going too far afield from what's presently allowed. It just allows for the development of potentially a larger, in quantity, number of units on a senior residence development if you have the property to support it. So that's our first proposed change. The second proposed change is in 7.17.6, having to do with density. And presently what this section says now is that there's no minimum parcel size, and it says that the SRD shall not contain more than 20 residences, or you can go up to 25 if you have the on-site community room. And then there's some other language which we're not proposing to affect. The reason we're striking the SRD shall not contain more than 20 residences, or 25 if there's an on-site community room, is because if we're going to change that first component that we talked about taking away the 25 max, then we have to kind of make sure it's in line and there's no inconsistency there. So that's why we're striking that. And we're not completely eliminating the idea of a community room. What we're proposing is maybe an either-or to give some flexibility to the developer and what the market may desire. So again, building in that flexibility with the on-site community rooms just gives an option to the developer and the commission to either have a community room for the residents or some recreation area. And just so you know, I didn't take the recreation area out of the blue. I took it from your multifamily regulations. I figured let's tie it to something that you're already familiar with and an existing requirement. So that's where I came up with those numbers. The rationale here, again, is primarily driven by market and affordability in this instance. Many residents my clients see in these types of communities just simply do not want or do not use the community rooms. And it's not free. It's not like the community room is just there and the residents are not somehow bearing the expense of it. It's an additional cost that's built into the cost of their home. And not only that, but it's also an additional cost that's built into their periodic ongoing common charges to take care and maintain that community room. There are taxes that need to be paid, insurance that needs to be paid, electricity and heat, et cetera, having to do with that. So it's just another budget item for anyone living in a senior residence development to have to accommodate and provide for. So that affects the overall price of the home and also the affordability for, a periodic budget for the seniors living there. Now, we know that affordability of housing is both a town-wide and a nationwide issue. We know that housing prices are high, material costs are high, land costs are high. For God's sakes, interest rates are high now too, hopefully coming down, but still higher than we're used to. And everything related to the cost of construction is high. So eliminating this requirement, an absolute mandatory requirement that a community building is constructed is one way to possibly reduce those costs to the consumer. And the third change that we are proposing has to do with the size of the units. And again, your current regulations now say that the maximum size of the units is 2,000 square feet. Then it says that you have to have no more than 30% can exceed 1,800 square feet, and you have to have at least 30% 1,400 square feet or smaller. In my client's experience, that is very restrictive on size, and there's really not a huge market for that many smaller units. We understand completely that you want to encourage housing diversity and a range of housing types, which includes smaller housing units. But these requirements, in our opinion, just don't match the market, and they're a bit too restrictive. And again, we're chasing affordability here, and that's what we want to encourage. And just by building smaller units doesn't necessarily say if I'm going to build half the normal size house, it's going to cost half the normal size, half of what a normal house would cost. Smaller units actually sometimes just tend to drive the price per square foot up, because the bulk of the cost of construction is not necessarily in the lumber, but it's in the cost of the land, the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of construction and mechanicals and plumbing and electrical. And you don't just cut those in half because you're building a smaller house. So if we're driving the per square foot price of a house up, that's not helping us with affordability. And these costs don't always justify building a smaller house. So our proposal seeks to increase a bit the size of the square footage of the house. We do continue to have a maximum of 2,400 square feet, so we're up 400 square feet from what your current regulations propose. We propose that 30% or less will be over 2,200 square feet, so on the larger size, we'll only have a maximum of 30% there. And then we propose that 30% or more will be 2,000 square feet or less. So it's just increasing that 1,400, which my client just doesn't see a market for, to 2,000. But it doesn't mean that you can't construct a 1,400 square foot. I mean, if the market changes, if there is a demand for that as a product, you can still do that. It just says now, instead of having 30% or more 1,400 square feet or less, you just have to 30% or more 2,000 square feet or less. So it just gives developers a bit more wiggle room to appeal to the segment of the population who is looking for a smaller housing unit but doesn't want to go quite that small, and 2,000 is a more marketable size. Based on my client's extensive experience, we just think that these changes make more sense. We think it will give developers more flexibility to build units that they can sell, that units that seniors and the town would like to have. This property that my client's controlling is going to get developed at some point, and I know we're not talking about that specific parcel here, but he does prefer to do a senior residence development. That's our preferred option for how to develop it. And we feel that it's one that not only he prefers, my client prefers, but also that the town would prefer. Any other type of residential development of this parcel or other vacant parcels in town that aren't SRD, will come along with more conventional type of development that doesn't have an age restriction and therefore involves more school-aged children, which I think is a constraint on your infrastructure right now that you're struggling with. So we'd like to make this project happen. We would like to work with you to make it happen. This is what we're proposing. This is what we think we can build, we think we can sell, and we think would be good for the town. That's what we think. We can talk about it on a item-by-item basis. You have the right to approve it, to deny it, or to modify and approve it. So if there are elements of it that you like more than others, we can talk about that. If you have concerns, specific concerns about an element, then we can talk about that. I hope that during the question period, after we get through staff comment and public comment, we can engage in a bit of that discussion. We don't think that we're proposing anything that blows your existing regulations completely out of the water and is completely out of line with what you've got. We're maintaining the density that you still have, and we're just giving a developer a little bit more flexibility to build something that they feel they can market and sell. Are there any questions I can answer before we go to staff?
We'll get back to you with questions after we get the public comment.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything that you want to add at this moment? No. Okay, thank you.
Okay, does that end your presentation?
For now, I just would like to reserve the right to rebut or respond to any comments that come up.
I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions in a minute. So now our town planner.
Thank you.
Director of planning, I should say.
So this is a request for a couple modifications to 7.15, the senior residence regulations. I'm not going to read them all since we've had them read a couple times tonight. I just want to remind the commission that we reintroduced the senior residence development about a year ago into the regulations after we had our housing moratorium. And at that time, the primary change we made was to add a 15% affordability requirement to the regulation. And also we added the cap of a 350 into the regulation. We had at that time had a cap of 250 previously, and we had reached the 250 cap. I did provide for you in your packets kind of a breakdown of all the different ones we have in town, where they're located, what kind of densities they have, just so you can get a feel for what we have approved in the past and where they're located. So I just want to point out that the stated purpose of your senior residence development is to increase the supply of affordable senior housing in South Windsor, promote well-planned, innovative development to become aesthetically pleasing senior residence developments, recognize that not all housing needs of our community elderly population can be met through public elderly housing, provide for a greater variety of housing for South Windsor senior residents, and foster small senior developments that can be nestled into neighborhoods with minimal impact on surrounding properties. It is intended these developments to be distributed throughout town. So as indicated, I think the attorney did a great job of letting you know what your current regulations allow in the densities. This proposal, as indicated, would allow a sliding scale increase in the number of units depending on the size of the project parcel size to begin with, capping it at 50. So I did have some discussions with staff about that, our staff, as we do with any kind of text amendment. And I just will remind you that Andrea Confrancesco from our senior center did provide you comment at your last meeting related to some of the impacts of senior housing. We do recognize with increasing our senior population, we're going to see increases in our senior services and things like that. She did indicate that when facilities do have a community center like that, like Watson Farms and other places, it does allow her staff to go out there and offer some programs in those facilities. So that may be a reason why facilities are desirable in these kinds of communities. She also mentioned, you know, so I was kind of trying to get a feel for these developments and what kind of services they use from the town. And she does say the Meals on Wheels, you know, as people age in place and they get older, Meals on Wheels often go into these developments, transportation services for doctor's appointments and things like that. So these are definitely developments as people age in them, they tend to use our services a little bit more. The other staff comment I had was with larger projects, there should be some consideration of a secondary exit or emergency exit so that we only have, you know, we just have one way in and out of development. So that, again, is a consideration that I would offer. In reviewing our, you know, most recently adopted plan on conservation development, which you all should have a copy of in front of you tonight, Chapter 6 does have a stated goal of diversifying housing choices that meets all the household types, ages, income, and life changes, and one goal identified is to expand senior housing. So certainly senior housing is something that we talk about, we need, we want, and we look forward to having in our community. I would mention that any proposal that would come forward would be a special exception site plan, would go through all the land use agencies at that time. Drainage, traffic, environmental impacts, all those things would be reviewed through the application process. We did send this twice to CROG since there were some modifications to it. I have the most recent letter from them dated August 9th, 2024, stating that the staff of the Regional Planning Commission of the Capital Region Council of Government has reviewed the zoning referral and finds no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or concerns of neighboring towns. So if this commission approves this application, in addition to some comments I've already made, I would suggest keeping a community facility or considering keeping a community facility. And I think having some open space requirement is not bad either. So I guess I'm kind of thinking the larger they get, maybe we should have a little bit of both in there. But I also would make a case for keeping some smaller units in there. Maybe it doesn't have to be 30%, but I think, you know, that we need to be building some smaller units because not everybody wants 1,400 or wants 2,000 square feet. There's a lot of people I know that are looking for housing that want to get out of their big houses and they want to go small. So I maybe the market isn't there, but I think that we don't want to eliminate building some of those smaller units. So the staff comments, and there are no other engineering comments at this time.
And do we have any engineering comments? No, okay. So now we'll listen to concerns of the public. You can speak in favor or against or have questions. Please come forward and sign in.
Good evening, Chairman Wagner and Vice Chairman Foley. For the record, I'm Peter DeMalley, President and CEO of Design Professionals, 17-person consulting practice here in South Windsor. It's a privilege to be able to address these comments by Ken and John, these application by Ken and John Boynton. I just have one question. Are we just working off of what's in the agenda, that language, or is there more extensive? Oh, okay. Thank you. I had one question with respect to density, whether or not, if it's okay if I ask Michelle?
No, sure.
Okay, yeah, whether or not we're retaining the 3 units per acre, buildable acre. No, that's not changed at all. Okay, well, that'll color my comments then. So we started the SRD developments back, I think it was around 1992. I know a developer then, Brian Edwards, came to our company and asked us to address a parcel. He had a small parcel with a duplex on it, just on the north side of Charles Enos Community Center, across from the high school, and asked what he could do with that. And we had just finished writing regulations in the town of Plymouth, Connecticut, allowing for 55 and older developments. So we'd already done that. We'd worked with Attorney Hal Cummings, local attorney in town, late attorney, who's a great guy, by the way, and a very competent attorney. And we wrote with the town staff. You were on, I think Michelle was on staff at the time. Marcia Bannock was as well, as in her capacity as director of planning at the time. And developed some regulations with the commission allowing for senior residence developments. That was a small, as I said, a small parcel. I think it ended up being 14 units. We subsequently added on garages because they were deemed to be necessary in the marketplace. So when we did that, subsequent to that, we were learning. For example, two-person households and 55 households, about half of those residents wanted 2 bedrooms because they retired for the evening at different times, didn't want to be disturbed, that type of thing. So went more from 1-bedroom units to 2-bedroom units. And then we subsequently looked at garages, and they wanted attached garages more often than not. And then they wanted, instead of multifamily units, we started with multifamily attached units. They wanted single-family detached and duplex units, as you see at Collins Crossing, across from Mitchell Fuel. So more and more evolved. The units tend to go larger as the market expanded and more people were looking for example, they wanted a place not only for 2 bedrooms for the adults, about half of the occupants, and then also they wanted a place for their grandchildren if they were to visit overnight, staying overnight periodically, wanted a place for them to stay. So the number of bedroom units increased, the footprints of the units increased, the attached garages, detached units, that type of thing happened as we started evolving. And the commission worked with our firm and other people. I know Rob Minorino did the Eagle Run development. We're not involved with that, but they went some very higher end units, single family, and that turned out to be a beautiful project. So there are a lot of changes as we went along. Indeed, in yesterday's Current, you may have seen it, front page section of the Local One edition. They had a development, I think it was Lovely Developers out of Southington. They had proposed a development, and all units are going to be 3-bedroom units. So the market has definitely changed. And we started slow with small developments, maximum 20 units, and as Dory mentioned and Michelle, we eventually went up to additional 5 units if you put in a community hall, a community building hall of some sort for everyone to congregate in larger groups, such as what Andrea Cofrancesco said, she can go meet with people. So that was evolved. So I think when we went through the POCD process recently, you adopted in July, the trend seemed to be let's orient our residential development more towards senior housing, 55 and older, 62 and older, rather than toward non-age restricted housing. In particular, it was mentioned that we have a overcrowded school system right now, even though we built 4 beautiful new elementary schools. We're at capacity or exceeding it, so that's a concern, a legitimate concern. So maybe we focus more on the senior housing, and also the fact that our senior population has grown as a percentage dramatically, so it's just going up and up and up over time, and there's more of a need for this type of housing. So we have a very limited number of these units in town, and they tend to be in very small developments. Perhaps I agree with the Boynton's decision to pursue somewhat larger developments. Now we're talking about up to 50 units. I think that's a great idea, and have a few comments. But I'd first like to, during the POCD deliberations, Commissioner Bernstein mentioned he'd like to know actually what the market is. There's really a market for these. So listening to that, we took that to heart. Incidentally, I'm here with Jim Newberry and Bob Nurek. Bob Nurek from Coldwell Banker has done more 55 and older sales of units in Hartford and Talon counties than any other broker by a lot. He's somewhat of an expert, and I'd just like to read into the record, and I provide you with copies since I'm done my presentation. But what Bob has, his analysis of this assessment of where we're at and what the needs are. It's a relatively short letter. Let me just read it relatively quickly, and again, I will provide copies. To whom it may concern, he's with Coldwell Banker. The town of South Windsor currently has a strong need for many more adult 55-plus homes. I believe all the adult 55-plus complexes in town were built prior to 2010. There are very few resales of adult 55-plus homes that come on the market on an annual basis. Most of the homeowners will live there until they are no longer able to live on their own or until they pass. Over the past 10 to 15 years, I've had many town residents that wanted to purchase an adult 55-plus home, but were forced to buy one in another town due to no or very limited availability in South Windsor. When 55-plus sellers sell their larger homes, the new buyers probably will have some children. This should not be viewed negatively because those 55-plus sellers are selling their homes regardless whether they stay in town or not, and whether or not they purchase an adult 55-plus property. Having additional 55-plus homes available in town provides the opportunity for those 55-plus sellers to remain in town if they wish. Please keep things in context. And realize that many current town residents who are 55-plus desire more opportunities to stay in town and downsize from their larger properties. These are often residents who have been in town for decades, contributing tax dollars and their time to various volunteer activities in town during that time. It is a shame to lose so many of those valued town residents over the years to the fact that there simply isn't an adequate supply of adult 55-plus housing for them. There are approximately 350 adult 55-plus homes in town. Over the past 3 years, there have been only 48 adult 55-plus resale homes that have come on the market through the MLS, Multiple Listing Service. This equates to approximately only 4% of the adult 55-plus homes being available for purchase each year. There is a potential buyer pool of over 8,000 age 55-plus adults living in South Windsor, fighting to purchase one of these 16 homes on average each year. Almost all these adult 55-plus resale homes have had multiple offers, and many sold significantly over their asking price. The average time on market for these properties was less than 10 days. This certainly is indicative of very high demand for 55-plus homes. Nationally and locally, it is well established that the housing supply is too low in the face of buyer demand. This is especially true in our local housing market. Greater Hartford real estate market is one of the strongest sellers markets nationally because of a simple supply versus demand imbalance. This shortage is even more acute for the local adult 55-plus market. Based on the South Windsor 2021 Equity Report, 30% of the town residents are age 55-plus or older, but adult 55-plus homes represent less than 4% of the households in South Windsor. This is a huge imbalance and reflects that the adult 55-plus demographic is severely underserved. Allowing more adult 55-plus homes to be built is a win for all. This will allow the adult 55-plus South Windsor resident population more opportunities to remain in the town they've been contributing to for years. At the same time, please understand that by increasing adult 55-plus housing stock, it is a financial win-win for the town and adult 55-plus residents. By their nature, the adult 55-plus housing does not increase the burden in the town's schools like traditional new construction projects. These communities usually have private roads maintained by the local HOAs, so the town is getting valuable increased property tax revenues with zero new burden on the school system and minimal impact on town services. Here's a list of benefits to town by increasing the adult 55-plus quota. First bullet point is additional property taxes to the town. Second is no impact to the schools. Third is roads are maintained by the homeowners associations. Fourth is town businesses will benefit. And fifth is provides the opportunity for 55-plus residences to remain in town. I have vast experience, this is again Mr. Nurk speaking, I have vast experience dealing in 55-plus projects. I've been involved with the design and specifications of many projects. I know the needs and wants of the 55-plus buyer. I've been actively involved with adult 55-plus projects for the past 25-plus years. During that time, I was a listing agent for 7 55-plus projects in Vernon and South Windsor. I've sold 55-plus homes in every South Windsor 55-plus complex. I'm the #1 real estate agent in closed sales of 55-plus homes in Hartford, Talon counties. Thank you for your consideration. Regards, Bob Nurk, the Nurk team, Coldwell Banker Realty, and he gives his email address and also his website address and also his phone number. So I will hand out copies in a minute as soon as I conclude my remarks. So I think I really welcome Ken and John Boynton's proposal to modify the zoning text amendments for senior residence developments. Welcome the idea of allowing a wider variety of unit sizes. Let the market dictate that. A greater number of units per development. So I have a few comments with respect to those specifically addressing these regulations. the notion of increasing the maximum number of units in SRD development to 50. Remember, we started in 1992 or thereabouts with just 20 units and increased to 25. We have a dearth of units in South Windsor and the growing senior population, so we definitely need to do this. So this should be changed, and as Mr. Boynton has requested, the number of units per development. As to the minimum number of units per buildable acre, I think we should consider increasing from 3 units per acre for single-family exclusive developments to slightly higher than that. Buildable acreage gives you a factor when you're looking at a blank piece of property, but the most important thing is when it's designed and regraded and developed, that it works well for the development. Whether it's, right now I think the buildable acreage is controlled by 15% slopes, if I recall. Yeah, 15% slopes. There's really no, in terms of the final product, there's really no difference between 15, 16, 17, 18% slopes you're beginning with to what you end up with, as long as it's a good development to meet the needs of the inhabitants. I think if you have incentives for creating this type of housing, especially housing, if you can have pedestrian access to other amenities, you might want to give an incentive, allow them to go up to, let's say, 4 units per acre or a little bit more than that for single family only. Really, what's the difference? Do we have a mixed use or we have single family only? I think 4, slightly above that units per acre is a reasonable thing to do if we're trying to encourage that, instead of artificially restricting how many units can go on the site other than the cap of 50. So I think there should be consideration to that. And also, I'm a little bit, I think you're going to continue this beyond tonight, I think is what I heard might be a factor. It's up to you. But one thing you have in your regulations, and I don't think you're entertaining changing that, 15% of these units have to be affordable to people, a household with an income no more than 80% of the AMI or average median income in Hartford area. So given that, I don't know how you do it with the larger units. You just don't. So the question is how small of a unit, given production costs and other factors, you really need to be at. We originally started with 1,400, I think 1,400 square foot units. I think we carried that over from Plymouth, if I recall correctly, but 1,400 square foot units. And then we got larger because the market was demanding it. You know, you should probably take a look at what the maximum size for those particular units would be. And maybe the developer can look at it from the perspective of AMI, what they can afford, mortgage, and et cetera, in terms of their annual income. But 80% AMI, you don't get a 2,000 square foot house with that, not even close. So with today's construction costs and land costs, and other factors that go into there. So I think you should take a look at that. I don't know what it would be. I like the idea of having a broad range like the Boyntons have proposed. I like that a lot. I don't think we should necessarily restrict that too much, let the marketplace determine that. But if you're trying to achieve units that are in the 15% range, 15% of your units total, then I think you should take a look at what's the maximum size of those units reasonably to achieve that goal, so that single person households can still get a house within SRD developments, which was the original intent of the regulations, meet the needs of the town. So just stressing that, I don't know what that maximum size is for that. Maybe it's just you just leave it to, hey, you got to justify it with respect to 80% AMI, but you're not going to get a 2,000 square foot house at 80% of AMI. And you also got to factor in that they're generally not going to be 4-person households. They're going to be 2-person households, 1 or 2. Maybe occasionally there's 3. They all have to be over age 21. At least one of the owners has to be, if I recall correctly, 55 and older. You're going to get relatively small numbers of people, and that affects the AMI, the actual payments they can make for a smaller household. So I think that's a factor we should consider as you're deliberating on this. But overall, I think they should be commended for doing this. I think we need to have a change to this if we truly want to create more active adult housing communities and opportunities for our population, which is fast-growing senior population, and try to keep them in town because, you know, a lot of them have given of themselves to the community, and they want to stay here. They just want to divest themselves of their bigger home that no longer makes sense for them, and they want to be in an active adult retirement community. And I think it's a great approach that they've put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Anybody else from the public would like to comment on this or have questions or concerns? Counselor?
Thanks. Hi, Carolyn Carey, 215 Abbey Road, South Windsor, Connecticut, and I'm just speaking as myself. I think this is a good, increasing the size of these houses is a good idea. I think the population that are buying 55 plus houses, I'm 55 plus, and I know a lot of people that have bought them, are looking for bigger houses. And my one recommendation would be, while, you know, for this one, they are thinking 2,400, you might want to not have to come through this routinely, so maybe make it 26 or 25, you know, make it a little bit bigger than that, so that you can accommodate, you know, more flexibility. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'll turn to commissioners. Commissioner Cavagnaro.
Thank you. So, reviewing the language here, I have a concern with one of the prompts. So, 0.5 and 0.6, I don't really have an objection to. It's 0.7 that is sort of a red flag, if you will, to me. Looking at the proposed figures, it's alarming, what I will say. I understand what you just said. You know, you want to make the units bigger. There may not be a demand or a market for smaller units. What I will say is South Windsor is a town like no other, where we cannot compare ourselves to, let's say, Bristol or Farmington, where, well, yes, these figures may not work in those towns. These figures absolutely would work in South Windsor. We have and again, I appreciate Peter Damali for offering the figures, but we have a massive population of older adults that have been here longer than I've been alive that want to remain in South Windsor. And I think we all know this. I'm not gonna, you know, beat the dead horse here, but what I will say is there was a member on this commission that I replaced as an alternate in 2021. They no longer live in South Windsor due to a lack of affordable, or I shouldn't even say affordable, but non-expensive, you know, units in South Windsor. They're up in East Windsor now. And it's unfortunate. You know, I hear from other older adults that want to stay in South Windsor, and it's disappointing because I wish there was more that we could do as a Planning and Zoning Commission to sort of address this. And now we finally have a tool in front of us to sort of alter the numbers, if you will. Back when we worked on these figures as a subcommittee, I remember Chairman Passaconis and myself agreed on this, that these units should be smaller to accommodate for the fact of individuals that want to age, I'm not going to say in place, but age in community in South Windsor, that want to stay in South Windsor. The problem not necessarily is that these units are, I shouldn't say too big or too small. I feel like especially the last sentence in 0.7 is really hindering it. If we really want to allow flexibility, we would utmost just get rid of or not get rid of, but just keep it the way it was, the minimum number of units. Why increase the minimum number, if we want to increase flexibility within these units? If there's, let's say, some units that want to be 1,400, but not all of them, and they want to go up to, let's say, a lot bigger, there should be a bigger bandwidth in terms of the actual size of these units. We talk about affordability, and I appreciate the Director of Planning for talking about it, but this is one way we achieve sort of the lowercase affordability, not the government-regulated affordability, but the sort of the market rate, how we make it a bit more easier for folks to afford it, where we make these units a bit smaller. What I will say is South Windsor will always have a demand, an appetite for individuals to come to this town, either to settle down and retire that either didn't live here before, or individuals that, again, have lived here longer than I've been alive, that want to stay in South Windsor and want to retire, want to settle down, and their final destination, if you will. I believe point 7, these regulations here hinder that. I believe there will always be a demand for older adults to move into place, to move and stay in South Windsor, because I still hear it almost every single week of individuals approaching me of saying, is there anything planning and zoning can do to address senior housing, to not necessarily expand it, but maybe one day when I'm done in my single family house, when it's just me and my spouse, or if it's just me, that there's a place to downsize to. So that is what I will say. I'm fine with point 5 and point 6, but I'm concerned with point 7, and again, feel free to address it if you will, but I'm pretty much steadfast on sort of my opinion here that, these larger units are going to hinder affordability for individuals that want to stay in South Windsor. So that is my comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Viteri?
Did you want to respond to
Well,
him?
I don't know, would you prefer me to respond on a case-by-case basis? Or
Actually, each commissioner would probably be
Okay.
happy to have you respond, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, with regard to Commissioner Cavagnara's comments, I want to assure you that what we're proposing doesn't require, or it doesn't prohibit someone from building smaller. It just gives a little more flexibility that perhaps 1,400 square feet, not every developer builds, and really, it is a small unit, and there's, in my client's experience, not much demand, and he's been building senior, 55-plus housing as well as non-age restricted housing. He's been building both, and he doesn't see much of a demand for it. So by saying that the minimum number of units, 2,000 square feet or less, shall be 30%, that just means, so you've got a dedicated 30% of the units that will not exceed 2,000 square feet. That doesn't mean they can't be 1,400 square feet. We're just saying the likelihood that we could sell 30% of our units at 1,400 square feet is very low. I think that's something my client wouldn't feel comfortable going and marketing. He doesn't feel that building that there's going to be enough people who can afford that smaller house, because again, I know we think maybe building a smaller house does impact affordability. It might bring it down a little bit, but it doesn't really knock it down significant, because there are a lot of costs that are attributed to, again, the cost of the land, the cost of the infrastructure that remain the same whether you build a 1,400 square foot house or a 3,000 square foot house. So there's not a direct correlation there. I guess the only thing I can really say is the numbers give developers a little more option. It doesn't preclude smaller units if there's a market for it. And I would just like to see the market dictate what gets sold. If we have people coming and saying, we don't like your prototype, they're not going to buy it. And if we have to develop a prototype for a bit smaller, and that's what everybody wants to build, then that's what a developer's going to do. But let's leave it to the market to kind of guide the hand on that. That would be my response.
So what I would say to that is, no matter what happens, whether we keep the regulation, the last sentence, I'm referring to the last sentence, the minimum, for example, whether it's 2,000 or 1,400, you're still letting the market dictate it, because the developer doesn't have to make a small unit. We're just saying that the minimum can be a bit lower if you really want to explore it, and if you don't, you could still have a larger unit. And that's what I just said earlier, that you have more flexibility with getting rid of the figure that's proposed there right now. So I don't agree with that statement. I understand where you're coming from. But again, I'm happy to hear the other commissioners' takes on it. But again, there is a demand for individuals wanting to age in place here, and that's why I said I'm happy to get rid of the last sentence and even leave the figures in the first two sentences the way they are, but the last sentence sort of what's the driving point for me, that allowing smaller units if a developer wants to build them, if the market changes 2-3 years from now, providing that option. I don't see the need to bring it up to 2,000 because, again, if that changes, you may have to come back and modify those numbers again.
So perhaps I misunderstood you. So if we leave the first sentence, maximum unit size shall be 2,400 square feet, and the second sentence, the number of units exceeding 2,200 square feet shall not exceed 30%, and then just strike the rest, is that?
I'm just saying I have a higher priority or problem with the last sentence, messing with the minimum. Again, like I said, I'm happy to hear other commissioners' takes on it, because again, my opinion is not the most important one here. I really want to hear others' opinions on it, but again, my concern is the last sentence of point 7.
And I think my client would be amenable to striking that and just living with the first two sentences there. We were patterning it after the existing regulation and how it was requiring a minimum number of a smaller size unit. If that's something that the commission overall feels that they would like to strike, then we could live with that. Thank you.
Commissioner Viteri.
Okay, just to build off of that a little bit, I would think, you know, I understand Commissioner Cavaliero's concerns. I would think anybody who's building these units would want to be smart enough to know which ones are going to sell versus which ones aren't going to sell. So, you know, I mean, I live right next to Eagle Run, and two units in the senior housing sold over the last year, one for $630,000, the other for almost $700,000. So I think that there's a market for, you know, I think, I don't know that this is the most damning thing, the way this is set up here. If there's not enough buyers for units that are over 2,000 square feet, I wouldn't think developers would be putting that in. So I'm not quite as concerned about that as you are. I still understand your point. I have a little bit different feeling on it. The lawyer in me is going to jump up in 716.6, where you've got either an on-site community room of 1,000 square feet or up to 600 square feet per dwelling, which means you could build 3 square feet of open space and you will have then satisfied up to 600 per unit. So I would like to see the words up to 600 square feet per unit, up to out of there.
Okay.
So it has to be at least 600.
I don't have any issue with that, Commissioner. And again, I thought I took that from multifamily, and if I mistyped it, then that's fine. 600 square feet per unit is
Yeah,
acceptable.
it's just, like I said, it's just more technicality. So if you had 50 units in there, you'd have to have 30,000 square feet of open space. So going up to a total of 50 units, you know, I left 55 in the dust many years ago, and I would still like to stay in, was the nicest way I could say it. I would still like to stay in South Windsor when it reaches a point where I have to go to senior housing. So having more units in here, I'm totally in favor of that idea, and I do believe that more and more people, as Commissioner Cavaniero said, would want to stay in town. As you people said, I've lived 30 years in town plus, and I would love to stay here as it reaches that point. So I don't have a problem with that. I do think just the breakdown of the number of units, because you've gone from existing statement of nothing shall exceed 2,000 to now where you could have 70% of your units 2,000 square feet or greater is kind of a big change. So I'm not sure that change makes a lot of sense all at once, but again, that's just a personal feeling on it. Beyond that, I like the idea of more senior housing. I defer to some of my other co-commissioners.
How you doing? So I'm in favor of, 7.5 and 7.6. My issue is I'm kind of adamant on a community center, a building, especially if we get up to 50 units, and it gives our senior coordinator a place to actually, they can hold classes. I mean, they can do it on their own when they have their own association in place. It's a gathering place. When you have 50 years, it's not the villages down in Florida, but it gives a place of community. And I would actually go a step further, and I'd like to see some, and again, I know it comes down to money, Ken, but like some recreation. Like, I would like to see, it's the new phase, right? Pickleball or some kind of outdoor recreation in a plan. It's not going to break the bank. And then on to Commissioner Cavaniero's point, we've had an outcry from the senior population of, they want to downsize, but they want to stay in town. So I kind of have to agree that, and although I understand, so usually when Ken or any other developer does a SRD, it's just not free willy. You show up with your blueprints and they build them for you. It's pretty much, you give them the options of 3 or 4, correct? That's how it works?
Yes.
So the chances of anybody coming in there and having an opportunity to say, I can't afford 2,400 square, I would really like a 1,400 square foot small unit. Sorry, those lots aren't available. It's, so, I don't know how we work through it, but I do believe that, because I've been in the environment, he knows it. Again, when you get there, you got 3 floor plans, 3 exterior looks, and that's what it is. But I would like to see, I'd like to see some space for the people that don't have the big bucks. You know, I understand the whole thing with the 55 and older, one person has to be of that age, and that, you know, kids are getting out of college and they want to stay home. So that's the caveat of the bigger residences, because anybody 55 and older and their kids are gone, they don't need 2,400 square feet. So it's kind of understood that the majority of the people in this community, they're looking for some smaller units. So I would like to see, I don't know what that magic number is going to be, but I would like to see the opportunity for people that, singles, you know, somebody they lost their significant other and they need a smaller place and they want to stay near their family. So that's my comment.
Commissioner Bernstein. Attorney Finelli? Okay. Do you want to pass these on?
Hi.
Sorry.
That's okay. So when I first read this in the agenda, the first question that popped into my mind was, where are we talking? Are you at liberty to share with us?
Oh, yes. I mentioned that in my initial remarks. The property that my client is specifically interested in and has a contract to purchase is at 186 Foster Street.
186 Foster.
186 Foster. I believe it's in an RR zone, not too far, though, from maybe R30, I think is right along Oakland there.
I think it's between the Foster Farm and, what is it, Orchard Hill Road? It's a big, long piece of property that
You're probably familiar with it. I think there was a pending application with the Siting Council for a solar array that got some publicity. It's the same parcel.
So a wise man realizes he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And frankly, the issues related to this application are things I hadn't given a lot of thought to. So when I listened to your presentation and I listened to Mr. Demalley's presentation, I find them very compelling. What I don't know, and I'm going to ask Michelle to give me some thoughts on this, is you have presented all the upside of what you're presenting, and it, like I said, it sounds very compelling. Our regulations have morphed to where they are for a reason. So, Michelle, what's the downside, in your view, of doing the things presented in this application?
I don't.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. And quite frankly, I think the developer would tell you that I somewhat encouraged them to maybe consider coming in with an application to increase the density based on our discussions from a year ago when you guys were talking about it at your public hearings. I think some of the downside is, in why I encourage them not to go higher than 50, for example, is I don't think we want to see huge developments like that. I think that was one of the reasons the commission kept it to 20 and 25, because some of our surrounding towns did do larger ones, and they were just big seas of projects. So I think scaling it, making it scalable is a good thing, and I think, you know, I worked with the attorney on the numbers a little bit, so I know the need. I hear it all the time. We get calls all the time in our office for people. I am just concerned about making them all large, because I know there's a need for small housing as well. So I guess, and again, you know, I was here when the first one was built, and, you know, Porter Share and Windermere Court, those were attached units that you could get for like $120,000 or $140,000. And it was meeting that need of that middle person that didn't have a ton of money but wanted to buy something, right? And that's what always was the goal, was to try to create housing for our citizens that didn't have, didn't need to go on to welfare but didn't have a ton of money. So that was always the goal of the SRD. And as developers developed it, it got more and more expensive as nicer units came on board and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of lost control of some of that. I think when it was taken out of the regulations, it was done at a time where a particular commissioner at the time is no longer in town, felt that we had enough of them around town, and all that kind of housing got taken out of the regulation. I think when we put it back in, one of the concerns about the affordability got introduced, right? So we've yet to see a project come on board with the affordability component in a senior residence development. We've only seen them in our design residence developments. So I think that is something new here. And as we go for larger numbers, 15%, you get a larger number of units. So I think some of that affordability is a really good thing. And then there's always the impact on our services. And I know that there won't be school children out of this, but we do offer a lot of senior services in town here. Not to say that we can't expand them, but everybody just needs to recognize that that is something that comes along with adding more seniors into our community, into programs and things. So I don't see any real downsides to it. Again, just some concerns with some aspects of it.
Thank you, it's helpful. That's all I have, thanks.
Commissioner Willett?
I know Bob Nurek didn't testify or present, but would it be possible to ask, Bob, can I ask you a question directly? Awesome, thank you.
Do introduce yourself and sign in, please.
Yes. Is there a pen here? Oh, did I take it? Yeah. Oh.
We're going to have to tether it to the podium, the pen.
I'm Bob Nurek with Coldwell Banker. Okay.
Awesome. So in your letter, which thank you for writing that, it says an average of 16 homes per year have sold that have been 55 plus. So that's about, just call it last 4 and change years, call it 60 people or 60 families have purchased a 55 plus in South Windsor. Off the top of your head, how many of them moved from South Windsor? They stayed in South Windsor of the 60 people versus how many are from out of town buying units here?
To give an accurate number is difficult because I wasn't involved in those 48 transactions, which I wish I was. But I would say definitely over 50%. It could be closer to 70, but it's speculation a little bit.
Okay. Is that something that we could get from the town clerk to identify? And there's a reason why I'm asking. And I'm going to tie it back to Commissioner Cavaniero's point around the 1,400 square foot, and Kevin's as well, Commissioner Foley. If we increase the statement specifically says that we have to have a minimum of 30% of the units that are 1,400 square feet or less. And that's speaking directly to affordability. If we remove that sentence, then in theory, and we just didn't have any regulations, you could build a 55 plus community that are all $1 million plus units, pricing most people in South Windsor out. So I personally, I'm fine with the logic of increasing the maximum to attract, maybe there's a buyer in town that wants a slightly larger house and they want to stay in town, great. Or maybe there's somebody from out of town that wants to move here, great. But if we're going to remove that 30%, 1,400 or less language, now they're all McMansions, and we create a development of McMansions. But I'd like to find out from the town clerk how many of the, however, since 2020, let's just pick a number, how many of those contracts were signed by people who are not from South Windsor? And that'll tell us whether,
Well, you can find out who they were, because I know the properties, but you don't know where they came from, because you're only going to know where they purchased, doesn't show.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a lot of title search
Right.
work.
Yeah.
You know, you'd have to find out the
Right.
title and then
Right.
find out where they came from. I mean,
The
is it
more I
doable?
think
Probably,
about it,
but-
it would probably be closer to 70% range. The one thing I don't understand is doing ones in various towns, and when we did things years ago, why do we put a restriction percentage-wise on certain square footage? If you offer 4, 5, 6 different plans, you know, with 14, 16, 18, 2,000, if you're going to go to 2,200, why don't you let the client, the buyer base decide which size they want, just as long as the builder is offering those models. It's been my experience, most of the people, at least going back prior to 2010 when they were being built, majority of them wanted more like 1,600, maybe up to 1,900, and there were a few that wanted the 2,000 or 2,200, and some wanted the 1,400. You know, variety is good, but I think you should let the buyer decide what they want, just as long as the builder is offering those variations or different model sizes.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. My big fear, though, is if we let the builder and the buyers determine that,
Right.
money walks, and we all know what else, you know, money talks and everything else walks, but my fear is that we would end up with a 55-plus community that's full of million-dollar units, just to pick a number, and now we haven't helped the affordability issue in South Windsor.
Right. Well, one is, I guess, if a buyer comes and says, I want a small model, and the builder doesn't want to build it, I mean, that doesn't, you know, if he's offering the model, it should be built. You know, if you have percentages, they might say, well, geez, all the 1,400s have been, that percentage has already been filled, and then the person wants a 1,400, can't get one if the percentage has already been met.
Food for thought.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and if you have more questions for Bob, I don't want to interrupt.
Thank you, Bob, appreciate it.
Just along this line, though, I mean, I hear that your concern is, you know, having all 55-plus communities being million-dollar homes and more and pricing everyone out of the market. I can assure you, my client would love to be able to sell the homes for $1 million plus. That's not what what my client's anticipated doing, nor what we think the regulations are going to allow for. I mean, we still have the 2,400 square foot cap on the size of the unit. A 2,400 square foot unit, which is currently building in surrounding towns and selling, it's probably going to be in the $500,000 to maybe $600,000 range, depending on the finishes. I mean, if someone wants all gold-plated finishes, we could probably get up there, but that's not where this is going. And by having the 2,400 square foot cap, it's going to build in some affordability just in that of itself. And also, the way the regulation is proposed, it says that the number of units exceeding 2,200 square feet shall not exceed 30%. So that means you'd have 30% in the high range of 2,200 to 24. If we strike that last sentence, you'd have 70% under 2,200 square feet, which builds in some affordability right there. My client doesn't think he can build a 1,400 square foot house in any affordable manner. The cost of just doing things, the cost of land, you can't build a 1,400 square foot, in his experience, and sell it to someone for a reasonable price. That doesn't make it affordable. Is there a little wiggle room? Maybe an 1,800 square foot house might be doable. But in his experience, which is fairly extensive with building these types of homes, not mega mansions or not even mini mansions, but, you know, in the 2,000 to 2,400 square foot size, you know, we just, that's a nice range where you can make it affordable, not 830G affordable, but affordable to a number of people, because it's a bit of a smaller home and they can cut back on certain finishes and things like that. It gives you some flexibility in size. You know, there is a little variation based on size, but not, like I said, cutting a house from 2,400 square feet down to 1,400 square feet isn't going to all of a sudden just cut that cost of the house in half. It just, unfortunately, proportionally doesn't work that way.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Rob, but I just wanted to just assure you that $1 million homes is not what we're trying to achieve in these senior residence developments.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of raising the cap on the maximum. I'd like to find a happy medium on a minimum, maybe not 1,400, but to not eliminate the sentence altogether, just so we can
Which cap
Commissioner
are you
Cavaliero's
raising?
point of view.
Which cap are you raising?
The maximum size,
Size.
as proposed in here, like, that makes sense. The last sentence to, and I know that the language is a little weird, Commissioner Cavaniero. I don't know if 1,400 is the right number, but I think moving it up that high is a little bit, we're pulling some affordability out. You'll still get your margin, the builder will still get margin. If they're building larger houses, they might be able to attract people that want higher end finishes and some upgrades, make the margin there, but still maintain a smaller maximum footprint size for affordability's sake. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Boganski. By the way, even though we're in a public hearing, so the fact you're an alternate doesn't matter, I'm going to be seating you when we do in a regular meeting because Commissioner Dexter isn't here, so.
Okay, thanks. I think one thing I want to kind of keep in mind here too is that I'm also in support of increasing it because this is a 55 and over community, correct?
Yes,
These are still working individuals.
they could be, yes.
Right, in today's world, a lot of them also work from home part-time too. So not just your spouse potentially, but one of your children, your grandchildren, but you're looking for office space, so I'm in support. I also think the affordability part is important, but I'd be kind of curious, what's the average? I kind of know, but the average 1,400 square foot house, if it goes on the market in this town right now, how much is it? Probably 350, 400,000?
Excuse me, if you're going to speak, please come up to the microphone. This is Mr. Knurek. Yeah.
Take Griffin Road, where a lot of homes are built in the 50s and 60s. Some of them are on the market for 400,000 today. You know, it's to buy a home under 300,000 in South Windsor, it's got to be falling apart.
Right.
Thank you.
And the only thing that my client would like me to note is that we couldn't build that today for those numbers that Bob just said. That's existing stock that was built and selling for that number. But if it was a new construction home, it wouldn't be 400,000. It would be more. Just the cost of everything is more, unfortunately, these days. So I think that's
So that's the one thing I want to make sure we keep in mind. As much as we say affordability, right? The cost of what it's going to cost is going to be, I mean, I think it's just putting a little bit more volume in town. Hopefully we have some people from out of town also kind of right, and help some of our folks that want to maybe downsize from some of their homes. But this is going to be 55 and over.
correct.
So we need to take that into consideration.
Right.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. So we call it 55 and older, but who actually can live in one of these? And I was looking in the regulation. So a family with one adult that's 56 and one adult's at 46 and a bunch of kids, can they live in this?
You're gonna have to give me a minute to look at that. So, I just want to check your definitions and see if it defines senior residence. I mean, I know from is it the Fair Housing Act that talks to these 55 and older communities, it does allow for just one person to be 55 and older, and they could have a spouse. And yes, I mean, just because you have one person who's 55 and older, I'm going to tell you, I am 52. And so I could be, in a couple years living there and have my children living there. Granted, they're a little bit older themselves. They're not school age anymore. But having a 55 and older doesn't mean you can't have a younger spouse or even same age spouse and still have some children. You just have to have one person, I believe, who's 55 and older. But I would have to double check your regulation definitions.
I mean, I've been under the impression that
Doesn't address it?
you can't have
I'm
a
sorry.
person under 21 living in a 55 and older, but I'm trying to find the language somewhere that, yeah, we can't find it either.
I don't believe it's in the regulation, Michelle just said.
No, we have them prepare documents like a common interest community, and those are where the rules, if you will, get incorporated. We don't have them in the zoning age. in the
Okay,
zoning.
so I guess I'm just a little worried that we're not accidentally increasing the school population when we were worried about that.
Well, the condo documents that we prepare for other 55 and older communities do pattern after what the law requires, which says you can require that one person be, there's something about the age 62. I wish I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared to discuss that completely, but I do believe that the condo documents require just one person to be of that age, and then they could
Yeah, I
have a spouse
understand
who
the one-
doesn't meet that age requirement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with a family that has a 62-year-old and a 52-year-old and 2 kids in elementary school, so.
And could that happen? I mean, could you have people on their second marriages and second families or adopted children that are younger? Any of those situations could happen. I think they're probably more the exception than the norm. But I guess we can't necessarily guarantee that a senior residence development won't have any school-age children in it. But it's also not, the market who's buying into a senior residence development isn't that market.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of families going into those types of developments.
Okay, so let me move on to a totally different question. When we talk about buildable acres, what's the definition here? Is it the same as, a single-family house, or what's?
We'll have a definition in the back of buildable acres.
Okay, so it's basically exclusive of buffers and slopes and wetlands and,
Yeah.
okay, so it's pretty much the same as the
Yeah.
rest, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's under acreage net buildable on page 226 of your regulation, but it's, you take out 15% utility easements, you have to subtract anything that's not
Okay.
buildable to create it.
The demand for senior services, I wonder if Councilor Carey could come up. Excuse me? Carolyn, yeah, I was wondering if you would mind coming up.
Let me move again.
I'm talking to you now as a counselor. You testified earlier as an individual, so, okay. We keep hearing that our senior services are taxed to the limit, yet if we build these houses, we're going to generate taxes from them. And I'm wondering why we wouldn't be able to, or would we be able to translate those taxes into increasing the senior services in town? The Meals on Wheels and the bus that takes people to medical appointments and all the activities. We should be able to absorb that just because this is going to generate more taxes.
I think that's logical. I mean, Andrea says that the senior services, are often maxed. By the same token, we do have people from out of our town that participate in some of our programs. So I'm not sure how that all works, but, I know that she has, like, if there's a trip, she delays people from out of town for signing up until she gives people in town a chance.
So, yeah, we have a first, local or residents of the town could have a first opportunity, and then if there are any spaces left over, they get sold to outside people. Is that what you're saying?
And I also think that, we're in a slightly different situation with our schools compared to our senior. But the senior activities are volunteer activities, right? Our schools, we must educate children from 5 to, their senior year of high school. So,
I mean, that's exactly the distinction I'm drawing here, is that we can talk about if we add a student and that student brings in a certain amount of taxes, we can't necessarily use those taxes without building another school, depending on the situation. But this is a case, I think, where if we generate taxes in these developments, we should be able to increase the services, whether it's a staff increase or hiring people part-time.
I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had for you. I'm looking at 2,400 square feet. I happen to live in a house where the main floor, it's an L-shaped ranch, so our main living floor is 2,400 square feet. We have 4 bedrooms, a big family room, big living room, kitchen, dining room. That's a big property, 2,400 square feet. I mean, you know, and it probably would have a basement under it too, right?
Well, again, now the 2,400 square feet would be still the max you could do, and there would only be 30% in the development that could be between 2,200 and 2,000, and 70% would then have to be under 2,200 square feet.
Okay. So does that include the garage?
Yes. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, Ken Boynton, Boynton Construction. So the 2,400 square feet.
Would you please sign in? I don't think you've spoken before.
Sure. Secretary. So the 2,400 square feet comes from a product that we've been very successful with. It's a Cape-style home. It has about 18 or 100 square feet on the first floor. It's post-COVID. Everybody wants an office these days, whether they're retired or they're still working. So that gives us a good master on the first floor, laundry, that does not include the garage. And then we have an upstairs that'll give us additional overflow, like another bedroom, a loft, and another full bathroom. So to do that, the footprint is only 48 by 46 or something in that vicinity, but it gives us about 2,400 square feet when you build it. So I agree with you on a ranch, we'd probably do the smaller size because ranches cost more, more square footage, more roof, more foundation. So that's where those numbers are coming from. It's not necessarily going to build a ranch. Yeah, you agree, you could put 4 or 5 bedrooms. That's not the intent. The intent is not to build a product that is not going to fit the over 55 community. We've been building these products for quite some time now. I think the last 10 projects have been, you know, even if it wasn't an active adult, my buyer's been active adult because we build a product that attracts them. Master on the first floor, little overflow if the grandkids want to come, they have a place to put them. You know, they don't have to, you know, move out of their room if you come over and spend the night. You know, there's flexibility to the product, and that's where the size comes into it.
Now, does that 2,400 square feet include the garage, or?
No, the garage is additional square footage.
Okay.
Right, that's just living space.
I think at least over a certain size, we probably ought to require garages, but that's not in there now.
I don't believe there's a requirement in there now for it, but I don't believe we would have any objection to a garage requirement because that's typically what our market wants and what we build.
So you're saying the market wants a garage and you're going to give it to them anyway, so we don't need to put it in?
Wants a garage.
Okay. So we do have I see Michelle.
I was just going to say that, you know, one of the things we do allow in the senior residence developments is attached units, and not always are there garages associated with attached units. So, I mean, we haven't had a requirement. If you want a garage, I think we would want to do it with a different text than tonight.
Right. That's not something
That's
that
something
is
really we
existing.
want to incorporate into it at this point, because I think you want to look into it a little bit more as to where we have them, where we don't, than just all of a sudden require them.
I just remember from being on ZBA, people were always coming in trying to squeeze a garage into the setback, you know, because the house is built without a garage. So there is the 15% deed restricted affordable, but the concept of affordability, I think as a lowercase affordability includes, you know, some other smaller units that people can actually afford to buy who maybe don't qualify for the deed restricted. How would you be dealing with first of all, the deed restricted? Would you be using the smaller units, or how does that?
Well, the deed restricted, I mean, we would have to set aside 50% of the total units that got approved, and we would have to build into the conveyance documents restrictions saying that they can only go to people who fit those earning requirements. And those are patterned after the 830G requirements, I believe, right? The 80%. So those will have to be, again, recorded with the town clerk's office. The actual deed will contain those income restrictions so that those get honored for at least 40 years, I believe. So those will be handled in one manner. And then we think that overall, what my client's building, the price point they're at is affordable in the town of South Windsor when you look at the overall housing stock in South Windsor. I mean, for brand new construction, a $500,000-ish range is not out of whack, I don't think, with what a lot of your new construction is. I mean, we gotta remember, we gotta separate new construction from existing housing stock because there's a total difference in costs and price, what goes into it, the cost of construction these days. But so we think that, you know, building our prototype units, which range from, what's the smallest unit, Ken and John, that we do? 19 to 2,200 is probably the smallest unit we do, up to the 2,400. So we're going to be anywhere from 5, maybe 600,000 going down there. So we think that the market will regulate that to make it affordable for people in town.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So I heard all of your opinions on the community center of, you know, that, you know, some of you say you'd like it and some may not like it. And so the fact of the matter is that I sit on a couple, you know, I live in a condo, I sit on their board, and it is true that we're always looking for a place to meet, and we'll meet in someone's unit alike, but the cost to each owner to have this building that's 1,000 square feet or so is just like building another home. I mean, it has all the heating, the cooling, the parking spaces, and the actual people that live here don't want it. They don't want the cost of it. So a condo fee right now in a probably it's going to be, you know, some places are probably $300, $300 to $400 a month, and that's probably on the low side. If we add, you know, I built many complexes. This, you know, 18 units, 25 units, different in those smaller. If I had to build a 1,000 square foot community center, their fee would be another couple $100 a month, and that does affect the market. Doesn't make it affordable anymore. That just, the house is a different price, so you're going to pay in the house for that community center, whatever it costs. You're going to chop it into whatever homes you got, and then you're going to have a fee every month to maintain it, to you know, clean it, to do all the things that same as if you own another house. So there are options that you can, you know, you can go to a restaurant, you can have a meeting there, you can go. I know in Vernon we go to the police station, we have a meeting there for once a year. They're required to have a meeting where all people are welcome to come. So for a once a year meeting, we're going to maintain a 1,000 square foot building, you know, year round. Is just, you know, that's why I'm asking to reconsider your thoughts on that. That, you know, there are other options that don't have to really encumber the town. I mean, the town doesn't really have to provide those services, and people can find places to have their meetings. And it's really a requirement to have one meeting a year. So I think it's a large expense to expect of a homeowner that's going to buy one of these homes to have a fee that's going to be that much more. Because the fee is a factor when you're selling a home. How much is the condo fee? That's the first thing. How much is it going to cost me a month? And along with everything else. And when we talk affordability, I mean, you know, they talked about, you know, $400,000 unit that sold, you know, recently, but costs have gone through the roof. I mean, to build a house today, the costs are nowhere near what you realize. You know, we sold a house pre-COVID, this 2,000 square foot home for $389,900, 2,000 square feet with 2-car garage on a single building lot, not even in an active adult setting, and we are $389,900. That same house today is $200,000 more, and that's all due to cost. And so things have just skyrocketed in the building industry since post-COVID. And I don't see them coming down. I really don't. Yeah. Softwood lumber fluctuates, but everything else hasn't. So that's really what we're trying to combat, that to make the numbers work. And we're trying to work with you on this concept of this zoning that you have. I think we can make it work, but I feel like we just need a little bit of compromise to make this thing happen. And I think it'll be a good thing for the town.
So, I mean, the state is forcing us to require a certain number of affordable units. So obviously those are, the cost of building those houses is probably not any less than the other houses, but you end up transferring that cost to the other houses. and that's the nature of that beast.
Right.
I think the wording on this sentence, number 2E, section 2, it should be at least 600 square feet per dwelling unit.
I'm sorry, where are you?
Paragraph E on your,
Oh, yes, instead of the up to at least.
yeah.
Yep, I think that one of the commissioners had suggested just striking up to, but we could do either.
Oh, talk a little bit about 186 Foster Street, just help me. I know this is a general concept, and I really appreciate that, but if we just talk about that property, how many acres is that? How buildable is that? How many units would you be putting in?
I believe it's about 16 acres.
16?
Yep.
And that's all buildable acres? Or,
I don't. Yeah, that's still a work in progress. We don't, it's probably not all buildable acreage.
I mean, I think it's a pretty flat piece of land, so, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this would be probably coming in with the,
Ideally, we would like to do more than 25 units. That's what really precipitated this regulation. We've got a big enough parcel of land, with enough likely buildable area to support more than 25. So that was, a motivating factor for saying, instead of getting cute with trying to, how do you break it into two? And you have the regulations that say that you can't have two SRDs contiguous with each other. They have to be separated by a road. And instead of trying to get cute with that, we just said, well, what's the
hopefully
rationale?
we'll fix that, okay? I think everybody here is really in favor of increasing the number of units. So if we fix that, though, that would put you at 36 probably for that property.
We'd have to see how many buildable acres we ended up
Yeah,
with.
you'd have to
Right.
calculate it, but yeah.
Right. I do think we would probably do mostly single family, which puts you closer to the 3 units per acre. There, he does have a couple of attached units. Perhaps we would do a mix, in which case then you'd get the 4 units per acre. So we really have to sit down, but we didn't want to spend too much time on doing all of that planning and design until we knew, is this something that we can work together? Because if it just completely is out of whack with what you want, what he's willing to build and thinks he can sell, then it's just not going anywhere. And some other type of development of this property will, be
But
pursued.
you are, I mean, I guess what I'm heading is I want to make sure that what we do gives you what you need, at least on that property, to be more than 25, so.
Yes, and the way we've drafted it will work. So it allows us to go over 25, and if the parcel contains over 12 buildable acres, we'd be at the 50 max. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get quite up to that with the densities. We'll have to really wait until we do the full planning and see.
So Michelle, if that were just kept as or somebody came in with an application to build single-family houses in there, do you know how many houses they could build?
I think they looked at it in around, was it 16, 14, somewhat? Yeah, 14 or 16, it really depends on the road pattern you try to adopt. There was a 50-foot right-of-way left off of Orchard Hill Drive that, road could come in and you could create some kind of loop road and potentially cul-de-sac. So, but I think it was somewhere around 16.
Did that property also have an alternate entrance? I forget how far back it goes.
You only have Foster Street's the only frontage, frontage on it. It's got a stub, like I said, a 50-foot stub that's left to it off of Orchard Hill.
Because we had a staff comment about having alternate entrances, but
Right.
Orchard. Well, then we have a cul-de-sac rule, which is how long the cul-de-sac.
Well, again, you don't have cul-de-sac rule because this isn't a subdivision. This would be a site plan and design.
I'm just using that as an analogy of what the fire department can live with. Why don't you come up to the microphone so we can,
I don't.
Yeah, it is. It's Orchard Hill.
Was your question, was there a second access to the properties? Yes, there's a stub that comes in from the upper street, I believe it's Orchard Hill, comes down, yeah. There's a future stub that actually stubs into there that's a
On
road.
Orchard Hill Drive.
Yeah, so that gets a little bit complicated to use only in that, it was used once when we did Summerwood, if anybody remembers Summerwood. What happened in that situation is a public road had to be built with a cul-de-sac before you did your road. Otherwise, it's gonna have to be some kind of easement from the town council being granted over the public right-of-way.
Just an
So it's-
emergency driveway
Right, so
versus
that
a
may be
road.
something that we'll get, when the design gets going, we'll have to talk a little bit
And
further
we might
about.
have some public input if we try to do that, too.
Right, right.
But-
Okay, I think that's all my questions. Any other commissioners have questions or comments?
Yeah, Steve.
You do? Okay.
Actually, I want to direct my comments to you. You had asked Caroline about human services. I can add some color to that. I worked for them as a bus driver for about 2 years. I left about 6 to 8 months ago, and my comments is that human services kind of operates the same way the school system does, which is they're maxed out at every level. We had 4 buses. 2 of them were rickety. 1 was put out of service. 2 of them had lease arrangements where we weren't able to transport children, which is another thing to keep in mind, is that human services doesn't just service seniors. They service everyone. They do it with smoke and mirrors. The day I left, I could have gone to DATCO or someplace else and gotten double my hourly rate as a bus driver. It's budget. Same issue Michelle has, same issue Dr. Carter has, same issue every department has. It just comes down to budget. So that's the situation with human services.
But I guess I have a problem with not providing the budget we need to serve a new population that might come in to these facilities. So that's just a personal comment, not related to zoning, but, okay. I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah. All right. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing I have is to say is my client is a reputable developer. He'd very much like to do this senior residence project in South Windsor. We think it would be a win-win, something that the town would like as opposed to more conventional subdivision and development of this land, and something that we can sell and has appeal. The most critical factors of this regulation amendment for us are increasing the cap to 50 on that sliding scale, and increasing the overall unit size, because we just can't sell and market in any sense of affordable, capital A, 830G affordable, or just affordable for a buyer, a 1,400 square foot home. That's just too small for what we can do. So we're just asking you to work with us a bit on that. That's why we've proposed what we've proposed, and we hope that you'll think about it.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Quick question. Ken, when you do these developments and people sign a contract of, they're coming into a SRD, and the expectations are that we are not impacting the school system, is there any contractual, is there any, rules of these communities, say, whatever you call it? It could be Foster Farms, SRD, or
Well, when we market it, it's an over 55. You have to be over 55 to buy one of our homes. So that's what our marketing would be. And now if they say, my son's coming in from college for the summer, I don't think the town's going to go drag him out of the house. So we kind of don't get into that. But the people kind of understand it, that that's the rules. If their grandkids are coming over, then there's no problem with that. People invite that. But it's just a restriction to limit the amount of children that go to your school system.
so like the HOA, whoever's the president of it, there's not hey, if you move in here, like a planned urban development, you have certain guidelines and rules with your HOA. Do they say you cannot have any, there's no rules that?
They can't. We build documents into the project. When you buy, you sign documents that,
The condo declaration.
The condo declaration. They cannot change that, so it'll always be a 55 unless the town decides that somewhere down the road, 100 years from now, they want to change the over 55.
Well, no, the condo, even if the
Then
town
they would
changed the
maybe-
zoning, they couldn't change the
The
condo
zoning would only allow them
documents.
to change it then at that
Right, the
point.
condo documents are the only written area where there's a 55 an older restriction. And that is, as we talked about, just one of the owners has to be, and occupants has to be 55 and older. But why don't you just talk a little bit about your typical buyer in some of these communities? What are your typical buyers coming in? They're not.
Well, like I said before, they're not what?
They don't have
No.
young families, do they?
Our typical buyer is like you've already mentioned tonight, that they have a large home and that their kids are going off to college and they're, you know, they don't need the 4-bedroom colonial and they're looking to downsize and they want to stay in the community. So you'll have a product to offer them. And that we build 95% of my buyers are over 55. They're not all retired, but they're looking for the one floor living, master bedroom on the first floor, maybe a little overflow, like I said before. And it's all I built for in the last probably 20 years. That's been our product and my buyer, and we do a good job with it. Our customers are happy. The town doesn't have any problem with us not performing. And I think we would, you know, add a compliment to your town and build a really nice community.
So a thought occurred to me that maybe we could get input from the town attorney, but that we can get after we close the public hearing, right? If we hold deliberation off to another day.
You don't have it on for deliberation tonight, right? So either you,
Okay.
so what kind of input are you looking for from the
Well,
town
I'm
attorney?
just wondering if, just to assure us that we're protected on what goes into a 55 and over development in terms of the schools.
So I guess I would ask you to give that to me in the form of a question that you want me to ask them, and because we've had these for a long time
Question
in our
is-
regulations, so this
yeah.
isn't anything new, the 55 and older. Are you asking what kind of restrictions can be put into them? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or should,
Or
do we
can a
need it?
restriction be put into them?
And do we need it?
Okay, I mean, I certainly could ask that question. I think it would probably be only fair to the applicant to keep the hearing open so that they could respond to the answer if they had a concern with it. Otherwise, you know, they'll have no opportunity to react to the town attorney's comments.
I guess
It's
my
up to
only
you,
thing,
but
I don't know if
that's what
other
I'd recommend.
commissioners are having the same concern I am, or.
Well, I am, I agree with you. If there is a way that we could write something in there to assure that, you know, and again, I understand, if you have a 2,400 square foot home and you have 2 kids they're off and they're in college, when they come home, they need a place to stay. They can stay with their folks, you know, and I understand the home office situation, but on the same token, you got one party is 55, the wife is 40, whatever it may be, and there's a possibility of, these communities in general, I would have to say that Ken or Bob or whoever would say that in most cases you don't see it. But we've been down this rabbit hole before where, you know, we've been told you're going to get 37 students coming out of a neighborhood. Now we have 142. So I think if there is a layer of protection for these SRDs to say there will be no students impacting our school system.
I guess I just will represent, we do have 250 units with no school children currently, so it's not like a trend we've seen in our town. I understand what you're saying. My gut feeling is we might run afoul of some kind of fair housing laws, but maybe you want to respond to that.
Well, I'm not your town attorney, so I don't want to, you know, speak for him or her. But I can tell you in my experience and to my knowledge, any restriction that you would impose in your regulations that say you cannot have school-aged children in this development would run afoul of federal law. I don't think, so if you want to leave it open for your town attorney to weigh in on that and see if you can build in a restriction, I don't have any issue with you closing the hearing and asking, because I'm pretty confident he's or she's going to say, you can't do that. It just violates federal law. But I mean, I think the closest you can come is the Fair Housing Act does allow you to have age-restricted housing. The declaration has to comply with certain requirements that are always built in, and by doing that, you can kind of mold who the residents are going to be, because you're going to have a bit of an older family unit than a younger one. So that's the closest you can get to having a no school-age children restriction legally.
So I don't know, are we comfortable with that answer? In which case, we don't need to keep the public hearing open? Everybody comfortable with that? Okay, so in that case, yeah, Councilor Carey.
So I was just doing this on my phone, but what it says is that the communities are required to enact specific regulations around age, like under HUD, right?
Part of our requirements is a common interest community gets created as part of the development, so yes.
So then it says that, that those communities need to, be specific as to who can live in them, and that generally, children are not allowed under 18. But the community has to write that in.
I would have to double check the Fair Housing Act to see if it can specifically prohibit anyone under 18. I think if they're living with a parent, they may be able to, but I would have to double check that.
Yeah, I think you should. In New Jersey and Pennsylvania, you can restrict, only because my mother lived in fair housing, and there was a restrict, and you had to be 18, and even then, you couldn't stay for long. You couldn't live there permanently. So I think we should look and see.
I have no objection to the town attorney weighing in on.
So Carolyn, excuse me, I didn't understand what you were reading from.
I just went on the internet and went to the Google. I just went on the internet to the HUD information, and then it pushed you to some additional information about 55 plus. But, based on that, I think we should ask this town attorney, just to be sure.
Okay.
Take my direction from them,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
that's what you want.
So in that case, we'll need a motion to continue the public. What? Say?
I don't think we should waste the time.
Okay. All right, I'm getting the impression from our fellow commissioners that we're ready to close the public hearing. Okay.
Move
need
to
a
close the
motion?
public hearing.
Did you motion?
That was a motion, correct?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. The public hearing is closed, and I guess deliberation is next meeting, right? Okay.
And the next meeting is September. Thank you.
All right, so then the next application, I can find my agenda. This is application 2424P, A1 Glass Re-Subdivision.
Get all of these up, and then I'll turn on those.
I think we only have 2 sheets of paper on this.
I have this aerial, and I have
Oh, wait a
print
minute.
itself.
Oh, the print, yeah, okay.
It's folded.
There should be a narrative too, right? That's Michelle, yeah. Okay, I think we've done shuffling paper, now the applicant can come and talk to us.
Hi, good evening. I'm Barbara Schmidt, landscape architect and project manager at Design Professionals here in South Windsor. and I'm here presenting for A1 Glass, which the applicant is Linda Henderson, and the property owner is Barbara Levy, her mother. And it's here is a 5-acre lot with 3 existing buildings, all filled with industrial manufacturing and other businesses. There's a dog grooming business at 251 Rough and Tumble in a historic building that's been around since 1850, I believe. They did an excellent job renovating it and making it look really wonderful inside and out. Linda Henderson, she's here to split this parcel that's currently one large parcel into 3 that have the existing buildings on them and 1 extra 4th lot for a potential new building in the future. So each of the, what's it? Yeah, so a 4th new one. So this property's been owned by the same family probably since 1984 to 1990. Robert and Barbara Levy have owned 3 parcels that have been there. It has been consolidated recently, January of this year, from an old, I think it was a draft from 1989 that the parcel needed to be consolidated, and it had not been. So it was recently consolidated in January. And so then we had to put together this re-subdivision plan so we could get this 4th lot out of here and also have 3 separate lots so they can be sold. Possibly lot 1, which is in yellow, to Rough and Tumble, and lot 3 in blue, possibly to AMK Welding, and 255 Sullivan is lot 2 in green. That is where Linda Henderson, the applicant, is A1 Glass, has a business in that property. Lot 4 in purple, there's enough space for, it's about an acre, and there's enough space for a modest size new building with access to Patria Road. 259, I think it's noted that it's 259 Sullivan now, and I believe it's going to have an address off of Patria. There's a little bit of, there's a lot of easements and other things, so I color-coded this map here to explain the parking a little better. So 251 Sullivan in yellow was approved in 2019 for 20 parking spaces. They only require 9, but we're keeping the 20 parking spaces that they were approved. They will have shared access with the 255 Sullivan because they will both come off Sullivan Avenue. 255 Sullivan, their parking spaces are in darker green. They need 24 spaces, and we're providing 27, so they have 3 more than what they need. Sort of spaced it out so that the access from Sullivan, it sort of makes sense that they have all the spaces on their side. And there's a little bit of shared spaces with Rough and Tumble at 251. 259 Sullivan, that has the darker blue parking spaces. They need 27 spaces, and they have 27 spaces, so they will stay as they are. There's a few access easements and utility easements, but it's all worked out. There's a drainage, there's a detention basin in the southwest corner, and another detention basin in the northeast. And there's a dark gray dashed line that explains the drainage divide as to where the drainage will go, and it's all explained in notes about the drainage access and who will have rights over which property when we have this re-subdivision. So I believe that that's pretty much, it's just paper. There's no construction being considered at this time. This is all just easements and access and drainage rights.
Okay. Our town, is there anybody else, that completes your presentation?
Yes, unless they have any questions I can respond to, but
We'll get around to that a little later.
yeah, there may be some questions.
Okay, so, Michelle, or, okay, Justin.
Thank you, Mr.
Associate
Chairman.
Planner Russo.
So I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of history about this site. This property was initially subdivided into 3 lots in 1969. In 1984, a site plan of development was approved, combining the 3 lots into one. In 1989, a site plan modification was approved for 2 other buildings on site. However, one of the buildings was never built, and the approval has since expired. Just to touch on the subdivision of the individual lots, zoning compliance for each lot has been demonstrated in the zoning data table that was provided. Lots 1 and 3 exceed their parking requirement with spaces on site. Lot 2 exceeds its parking requirement via shared parking on Lot 1, as Barb had described. There is a small wetland area in the southwesterly part of the site. A minimal impact wetland permit for this subdivision was approved on June 5th, 2024. The new frontage lot proposed is approximately 1 acre in size with 260 feet of frontage along Patria Road. At the time a development is proposed, site plan approval from the various land use agencies will be required. A Patria Road address will be assigned to the new lot. Currently, there are no sidewalks on the site's road frontages. The closest sidewalk on Sullivan Avenue is a 10-foot wide multi-use path, approximately 250 feet to the west. The commission may want to consider sidewalks/pathways along Sullivan Ave frontage and or the Patria Road frontage. And at the request of the fire marshal, staff have discussed with property owners the potential of changing the address for lot number 3 to a Patria Road address, given they have no frontage on Sullivan Avenue. Lot 3 will have access to Patria Road served by a proposed access easement over Lot 2, which is described in detail on the site plans. We would take this request, we would request this take effect with the subdivision Mylar filing. If this re-subdivision is approved, there's no other planning modifications to request, and there are no engineering comments on this plan.
Thank you. Anybody from the public have comments or concerns? Hearing none, we'll go to commissioners. Commissioner Boganski.
I don't have any comments right now.
Commissioner Willett.
No comments or questions?
Commissioner Bernstein.
So this lot's across from the VCA Pet Center, right?
It's next to it.
Next to it. So we're barking up the right tree here, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry. What's Rough and Tumble?
Rough and Tumble is a dog grooming business, a very nice one. And you can, when you drive down the road, you can see their beautiful lighting from the windows. They've done a nice job with that property.
Thank you. That's it.
Commissioner Foley.
I have no comment.
Commissioner Viteri.
Just a question, was this proposed Lot 4, was that originally parts of lots 1 and 2?
There was a plan in 1989 called Depot Square, and that was a 24,000 square foot building proposed and approved back then. So it's just sort of a continuation of an old idea. The property owners have been approached by a few interested buyers when they see this empty land. So we pieced it out so the impervious coverage works out for all the other lots, and for that one too, they will have to.
Oh, okay. That was just a curiosity question. I have nothing else.
Commissioner Cavagnaro.
I have no comment. Thank you.
Okay. So you mentioned a historic building.
Yeah, the Rough and Tumble building, I was looking into it. It's like it was built in 1850. It wasn't in great shape when Rough and Tumble took it over, and they've done so much with the inside and with the outside too. So
Yeah, okay, so that's it kind of looks modern now, so that's what
yeah,
I mean.
it certainly
Okay.
does.
All right. You're changing the address of Lot 3, but it looks like Lot 4 actually is on Patria Road also, so why wouldn't that also have a Patria Road address?
That's, yeah, we're looking to give Lot 4 will have a Patriot Road address, and we're looking to
Okay.
request that Lot 3
Now, do you,
has a Patriot Road address.
you don't give addresses out until the building is built, or would we set that now? When-
Actually, I get to do addressing. So what'll happen is, as the approval takes place and it goes on file, we'll reassign addresses, or we'll assign addresses, and we have a process where we send it out so it gets on all the right mapping and 911 and all that kind of stuff. So at the time, we don't assign them until it's going to go into construction, so we don't have false addresses out there. Or a Mylar goes on file creating the.
So, Justin, the sidewalk 200 feet to the west, is that just basically interrupted by the train line? Is that,
Yeah.
okay, so, I mean, personally, I'd like to see the multi-use path, the 10-foot path, continued on Sullivan Avenue.
I have an aerial. Here in the yellow is Rough and Tumble, this is their project site, and here's the multi-use path. From our property line to the road, there's about 11 feet, and there's a large leak-off paved with a catch basin, a 10-foot wide path. I don't believe would make sense in this scenario with only 11 feet. So I'm not sure how that would connect. So we have Rough and Tumble here. We have the train tracks right there. And then there's another property that doesn't have a sidewalk, and then there's that. And then this aerial, you have to, from the east, you have to go about a mile to get to the next sidewalk, which is just a little section in front of the Connecticut Brewery. And then there's more sidewalk down here. So, I mean, I like the idea of having everybody connected. In this plan, in this situation, since it's mostly paper, actually it's all paper and there's no construction going on. You know, we ran some costs for this potentially falling down on our property owner, and it doesn't seem very feasible for the applicant to have to put in a sidewalk of that size.
I mean, part of our plan of conservation and development is to end up with sidewalks or preferably bikeways all the way along Sullivan Avenue. And obviously, we can only implement that when zoning can only do something when property owner comes in with an application. So you end up like we've got here with a certain number of sidewalks to nowhere that eventually we would hope to connect up with town funds or whatever. But I think it's fair to ask a property owner coming in with a big change like this to put in something. Now, you're saying that because of where the catch basin is that already there?
Yeah, the catch basin is existing. I do have a photo.
Can we, yeah. I mean, we have a picture in our packet, this one. Not that one, no. Mhm. Thank you. Okay. So you have a storm sewer and a catch basin. Is that what we're looking at here? Okay.
Yeah, it's, there are quite a few paved leak-offs off of Sullivan Ave, all up and down. I don't know if there was a plan in the future to widen the roadway or some other engineering ideas why all of the catch basins are far.
I'm guessing when they rebuilt the road, those things were left where they are, but Mr. Demali looks like he'd like to comment, and I'd be happy to listen to you.
I have no doubt that in the long range.
So this is Peter Demali.
Yeah, Peter Demali, President and CEO of Design Professionals. I already signed in previously for the prior hearing. Yeah, I have no doubt that the long-range plan for the state was that section of road would eventually be, if the traffic warrants were there, would eventually become 4 lanes, 2 in each direction. I don't think we've seen that kind of volume to justify that as of yet. All the traffic, all the catch basins, the leak-offs are all set way off the roadway to accommodate a future wider road. However, we don't, this hypothesis right now, so I think hypothetical. So I think what we should look at is what we have right there. As Barbara indicated, we have 11 feet from our property line to the roadway in Sullivan Avenue. I went over and took a look at what we have, the 2,000 feet we put in front of Vistar and also Hyundai Mobis. And that has a 4-foot snow shelf. So if you assume a 4-foot snow shelf, and we typically have a sidewalk 1 foot inside the property line, that gives you about a 6-foot span that you could work with. The only problem is when you go to the, assuming it would be bituminous concrete just the same as in front of Skinnell's properties that you approved previously. So if you have 6 feet to work with, the only real problem with that, there are 2 things you should take in consideration. One is that as you go to the east toward Patria Road, assuming you go full Patria Road to the northwest corner, it's about 200 feet, lineal feet. There is that catch basin we'd have to work around, the existing catch basin. And to go around that, you're into the detention basin, which slopes down. So if the owner were to provide an easement, we'd have to go around that catch basin, I think. I think that the state won't allow us to go into the paved leak-off. We don't have to go for an encroachment permit. The applicant does not now, but with a sidewalk or pathway, whatever you want to call it, it would require an encroachment permit from District 1. So we'd have to go to them. They won't allow us to go into that leak-off area and then back up again because it's for drainage, may ice up in the winter, that type of thing. So I think we'd end up going around that. And so you'd have to fill in on the slope for the detention basin, the existing long-standing detention basin. And by doing that, you'd probably have a retaining wall for a certain distance there. And then you'd probably want to put a fence on top of that because it's so close to a walkway, people bicycling, walking, what have you. So that would get a little bit complicated. And again, it would only be, I think, maximum, so somewhere in the 4 to 6 foot wide range. I don't see us being able to accommodate something that's wider than that along that stretch. The other thing to consider is that, as Barbara mentioned, it's a mile to the next sidewalk to the east. I understand trying to achieve a sidewalk all along Sullivan Avenue, but if you look to the west of us, realistically, what's the chance of connecting the two? You have the place, the small business, which was a machine shop, and then became the donut place that shut down not too long ago. I don't know who's in there now. Somebody else is in there. With a driveway cut. So there's a stretch of lawn initially from the Skinnell walkway, and then you get into a driveway serving that former donut place manufacturing facility, and then you have the wide driveway for the facility. I think they sell these driveway sealant in the big, they have the big containers there. They bring them in by rail and they ship it out. So you get, that's a pretty wide driveway. And then you have the rail line that goes across Sullivan Avenue. And then you get to our northwest corner. So you have 200 feet, which is a lot of problems for connecting to the Skinnell. So we'd end up with you're coming off, basically a pedestrian would come off of Sullivan Avenue and come up 90 degrees into the sidewalk, walk a short distance, under 200 feet, and then be put down at the Patria Road, Sullivan Avenue intersection. So will it be used? I don't know. There are some problems associated with it, not major problems, but it increases the cost. So I think when we, like, if you just put in a, 6-foot pathway, 4 or 6 feet?
Yeah, without engineering, without pipe work with the catch basin or anything, just a construction cost for a 6-foot wide is over $11,000.
And then we'd likely have to have a retaining wall. I don't think it'd be all that long. And then you'd want to have a fence on top of it for safety reasons for the people availing themselves of the sidewalk. So that would be an addition. Plus, you'd have to have the increased costs, as you mentioned, engineering, but also going through the approval process for the encroachment permit with DOT.
I don't know, what do you think?
The reason for those leak-offs is the future plan is for another lane. I mean, that's kind of been known for a while that if and when.
Wouldn't surprise us, yeah.
So, I mean, knowing, like you said, the little machine shop, then the railway, in order to have a bike pathway over the railway, that would take an act of Congress with the railroad company to make it so it's pedestrian safe.
Oh, yeah.
To incur the expense to this client, I think it's kind of unfair. I mean, if the state widens a road and makes the improvements to the rail, then possibly it makes sense, but at this point, I just.
If they widen the road, the area to put the sidewalk in goes away.
Probably gonna blow up all the work that they do if they widen the road as well.
It'd probably be gone, yeah. Sidewalk would be gone.
Where's the property line?
The property line, 11 feet in?
Yeah, it's, on that picture, it's about a foot from the.
Catch basin.
The catch basin.
Okay, so you really don't have,
No, and if you go around, then you're into the detention basin,
yeah.
which would affect both Lot 1, Lot 4.
I mean, normally we try to put sidewalks in the easement in the town or state, I don't know what the right word is, not setback, but.
Right away, yeah.
Right away. But there's only a foot, is what you're saying, from here.
Yes.
Yeah. You can engineer anything, but whether or not it will stay there, the prospects are, doubtful. And whether or not it'll be used. And I agree with Commissioner, Vice Chairman Foley, that trying to get anything through the railroad, you go through such a bureaucracy, it's amazing.
That won't happen.
I don't know, anybody else have okay, all right, enough on that subject.
Thank you.
So, what about interior walkways? I guess it's all parking, right?
Yeah, it's all parking lot. There's no curbing, so it's just like some bituminous, and there's parking up by the building, but there's no inner sidewalks, except for the handicap ramp that comes up.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? You have anything else? We all set? Close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. All right, so now we are getting into our regular meeting, and as I mentioned before, we'll seat Commissioner Bagansky for Commissioner Dexter. And somewhere I have an agenda. Okay, great. So the next thing would be the minutes. We have minutes for the 7/9/24 and 7/23 meetings. I didn't have any comments. Does anybody else have comments? Approve them by consensus? Agreed. Okay, public participation on anything which is not on the agenda? Anybody here to make a comment? Okay. In that case, we can take up application 2424P, A1 Glass re-subdivision. Any discussion before? Anyone want to make a motion?
Motion to approve application 24-24P, A1 Glass subdivision, request for re-subdivision of parcel of land into 4 building lots.
You're using, you need
No.
to use the, you need to use the motion that
Oh,
she gave us.
do I not have it? I don't think I have it.
You have it, I'll give it.
Okay.
All right. So are we, well, question for number 2, the question about sidewalks, are we not?
Yeah, I think we've decided not to do sidewalks.
Okay. So the approval is for 4 lots numbered 1 through 4. Drainage and construction for the subdivision is subject to the approval of town engineer. All lots shall be serviced by the town of South Windsor sanitary sewer system and are subject to the approval of the Water Pollution Control Authority.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
what you can do is you can say standard conditions 1 through whatever, or whatever the numbers are, and then only the ones in italics you actually have to read, or anything with money you have to read.
Okay.
And since I don't have it in front
So
of me, I
standard conditions are,
don't- the ones in,
all right, and then a drainage assessment fee in the amount of $150 shall be submitted to the commission. Number 10, the new street address will be Lot 4 is number 20 Patria Road, and Lot 3 would be number 34 Patria Road.
Good.
Just the history.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries unanimously. And now we have the CGS 824 referral. I understand that you're going to present that?
Yeah, I am. I gave Molly Keys the night off. So you did receive in your packet a copy from the town council, or from the town manager, the referral that the town council forwarded. This is for some future improvements for the fairgrounds on Brookfield Street. It's going to include bringing a water line down, which is shown on the GIS map that I provided for you. There is a location of 40 by 80
Tell you
pavilion
what,
that.
if you'd wait a second, I think we're all shuffling our paper here. At least I am. I don't know what happened to my copy of that, but, okay. Oh, I know what I'm looking for. There it is, okay. All right, now I'm ready.
Okay, so if you look at the map, the elements that are shown on the map is a water line that is going to be brought down Brookfield Street to the site. And then they are also proposing a 40 by 80 pavilion that has not been determined where exactly on the property it's going to go. Just for the benefit of some of the commissioners that weren't here when this was originally approved in 2015. As you recall, this is a debris site as well as a fairground site and a lot of other uses to it, so we want to make sure where they locate it. I know Parks and Recs wants to strategically locate it so that the other uses that do occur on site can still continue. So this is your 8-24 referral for you guys to give the town council comment back on it, whether you agree with them moving forward or not. It is subject to a site plan. It's up to the commission as to whether you want the site plan to come back to you or if you want it to handle it at the staff level, but they are going to prepare a site plan showing, you know, all the elements of it. This is the first step of the 8-24 referral.
Any comments or concerns?
Yeah. A question. So it seems to me, this is more from a consumer point of view, before the town or anyone goes investing, this this piece of real estate needs some serious drainage. Is there anything that's being done or considered for that?
I was at a meeting today where it was discussed, as a matter of fact. There are some drainage improvements that are needed, particularly in the southern part of the parking area there, and those are things that have been identified, and part of a bigger plan for this will be addressed. If the commission, just bear with me a second, I want you to know how this was created in the first place. This actually came into being as a result of all the fees that we collected in the fee of lieu of open space funds that the Planning and Zoning Commission has. So in 2015, it was somewhere around $300,000 that you had collected as a commission and invested it in this property to make the fairgrounds. So that's kind of where the money came from. So there was a limited pot of money at the time that wasn't, you know, a capital project that the town had been planning for a long time. So it's been growing as the years have gone on. Certainly the drainage problem has been identified. And I know that there's been some discussions, it just hasn't been, hopefully with this, some of these improvements, we'll be looking at that as well.
All right, good, thanks.
Commissioner Cavagnaro?
Thank you. In the title, it says, resolution referring the proposal to build a 40 by 80 pavilion. I'm going to assume the unitary measurement is feet. It doesn't say. I feel like anyone can get feet, but I just want to make sure it's on the record, like the document we sent to town council, so this is 40 by 80, like, you know, for feet. That's my only comment, because it just doesn't say the unitary measurement on there.
Could you explain that again?
So the title, it says to build a 40 by 80 pavilion, but it doesn't use any like measurement, like either like feet or millimeters. Like I know we're talking about feet, but it should say feet. When we send this, yeah,
Okay.
I just want to make sure, yeah.
All right, so that's understood to be feet. Yes. Okay. Are we all in favor of this? I mean, so let's have a motion for a favorable referral.
Do we need a motion for this?
Yeah.
Move to approve CGS 8-24 referral, the Mitchell Fairgrounds improvements.
Second.
Okay, I think the wording is a favorable reply to that, yes. Okay. All right, any other comments? All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. All right, now the last thing we have, at the last meeting, we denied the application for the property, which has got various names, including just the design commercial zone, but also referred to as 22 Wheeler. And I was charged, the commission voted to establish a committee to study and work with the property owner to try to come up with a concept that could be ultimately brought back to the commission and approved or not. So I prepared this draft which is basically a charter for that committee. Part of it just describes, the first thing under issue just describes what we're dealing with, and the charter is, the committee is charged with creating a proposed text amendment guided by the POCD. It's more likely to lead to a viable economic development potential and attractive projects consistent with the Buckland Gateway Development Zone and increased tax revenue while addressing concerns related to impact on nearby communities, town services, and schools. And it's also suggested that before drafting a detailed text amendment, the committee develop general concepts for discussion with the PZC. I copied in that section of the POCD. The membership is listed on the last page, but before we get to that, there's a whole bunch of considerations that this committee will have to take into account, and a proposal that we the committee tour the site, do a review of the history, discuss concepts, and go on. There's data to review. And the membership that I'm proposing is myself, another member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Economic Development Commission, and 2 members of the Town Council. I would say that Councilor Carey would definitely want to be one of those if you're available. And we'll hopefully find a Democrat who's willing to participate. The property owner and a resident, I think, the property owner would not be a member of the committee, but would be present. We have a resident from Smith Street that I think would be a very valuable participant. And the staff would be ex officio members to support us. Now, 2 things. One is I've had conversations with Commissioner Foley, who I think would rather not do anything. And then I had a conversation with Commissioner Dexter. She had the suggestion that we have a special meeting or a meeting with the whole planning board here, and then give us each a chance to talk about what our concepts are, each of us, and then the committee could then go off, taking that input in addition to everything that's happened. So we would start out by having a meeting, probably just a session in one of our meetings where we would, each of us say what we think about this, where we'd like to see it go, what we think we could work with, or what our issues are, and then launch this committee. Commissioner Dexter is willing to serve, unless you'd like to be on it. You want to be on it? Okay, so that would.
And I had said in the previous that any of us that are willing to be on it should be able to be on it. That's.
Well, I just am concerned that this gets too big.
You can't have more than 3 members. You can't have a majority on it. Otherwise, it's a meeting, a planning and zoning meeting. So you can't have more than 3 planning and zoning members on a subcommittee. Otherwise, it's a planning and zoning commission meeting.
Mm-hmm. So we could put a 3rd member on, or not.
Yeah, you can have 3 planning and zoning members on the committee. You just can't have a 4th, because then you've got a quorum.
Before we get to that, though, we also had some input from the applicant.
So this is from Don Poland. He looked at our draft and had a couple comments that he asked that I bring to you tonight. So just briefly, he's looking at the process be open to all outcomes, that no outcome is privileged over others. He said that the considerations as outlined equally consider economic and market factors along with land use, municipal services, and impacts while seeking to find a balanced outcome for the design commercial zone. He gave us a whole idea of how to shorten the schedule. You know, we have a 6-month schedule that we kind of threw out there.
Schedule is on the back that we proposed.
Yeah,
so.
He's suggesting that we could reduce it down to 4 months, and he has a number of ideas of how that could be accomplished by the data that could be provided, and he's also offering services of their market research to add to it as well. And I guess his last point is most importantly, most, if not all, the data be complied and provided by September 23rd meeting. You know, again, he's trying to speed up the process, evaluating during the October, compile scenarios in November, and then have a regulation in December. You know, again, as I told him, I would bring this to the commission. We had kind of laid out something we thought was a reasonable time frame. I don't know what the appetite is trying to work too quickly through it.
Do we have mixed proximate uses on Smith Street? No. Or is he just referring to the Evergreen Walk area?
I think he's probably referring to.
Okay. So comments from members?
I don't want to be, technical or whatever, but we call it a subcommittee. Could we change the wording to, we have workshops, okay, where this is an important piece of property here, and unless everybody feels as though they can voice their opinions in one meeting, I'd rather that the first one be downstairs and we call it a workshop, okay? And workshop is there's no limit to anyone, correct?
Yeah, public meeting.
It's going to be a meeting. It's going to be a meeting that has a workshop in it. So it'll be a planning and zoning special meeting.
There you go. So let's do one of those. How's that sound?
So the question is, do we want every one of these meetings to be a workshop? And that would mean we'd have that many special meetings?
Sure.
Basically means meeting every week for, till we get this worked out.
What are you looking at?
The schedule on the back of my handout.
And again, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to, so these dates are proposed
Yeah.
dates, right? So you want to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like,
We modeled this somewhat after the other subcommittees that we've been running over the last couple years. And they were done on Monday nights from a 5:30 to 7 timeframe. The town hall is already open during that time. So those are the dates that you're going to see there in front of you that we just kind of threw around. If you guys decide that you want to deal with this as a commission as a whole, we should go back to your Tuesday night and have special meetings on the off weeks that you want to talk about it. So that schedule wouldn't apply, I guess is my point. Because I wouldn't anticipate having a special meeting on a Monday night at 5:30 for your commission. That doesn't make sense. For the entire commission, right? Tuesday night's your regular meeting. Yeah.
So I don't know, I hear you, I had a suggestion, or rather Commissioner
like the
Dexter had a suggestion. Other people want to weigh in? Alan? What do you think? Committee, meet as a whole, the whole time, workshops?
I mean, I'm fine with the way it is right now as a subcommittee, because I mean, when we met as a subcommittee a year and a half ago, it sort of felt like a workshop where, I mean, meetings weren't necessarily like televised, but we were meeting, we were just, didn't really have a scripted agenda. We were able to actually work on, what we intended to do. I don't really have a guided opinion on this. I can see the benefit of having a third P&Z commissioner on there, and that's sort of where I'll defer to other commissioners because I don't really have a strong opinion on that. But yeah, I don't have a strong opinion whatsoever. As long as we can get this group moving, I think that's what's important.
Bob?
If I understand it right, what you're suggesting is we'll just, instead of meeting every other Tuesday for regular meetings, we'll meet every single Tuesday. One week will be the meeting and the next week will be this subcommittee meeting or whatever we want to call it, and keep going like that? Is that what you're suggesting?
It wouldn't be a committee, it'd be a workshop with the whole committee and these additional people.
Semantics notwithstanding, we would be meeting every single Tuesday, right? That's what we're proposing?
and would that go at 5:30 or would that be?
Oh, it would be a 7 o'clock.
No, it'd be 7 o'clock. And again, some of the things we'd have to check is availability of room, and you guys are televised when you have regular meetings, so I would have to make sure that IT is prepared to pick up those meetings as well.
And there wouldn't be public at the meetings, right? This would just be us.
No, they are public, all your meetings are public, so public would be able to be here, yes.
We don't necessarily have to invite the public to
But
speak.
the subcommittee is not televised.
Yeah.
It is, any meeting we hold here is public unless it's an executive session. Whether or not they participate is a different thing. Anybody can sit in the back of the room in your subcommittee meeting and listen to what goes on if they want to. They get posted, agenda gets posted, minutes get posted. So typically people don't show up, but they could if they wanted to.
But as long as 4 or more of us meet, it would be a full meeting.
Once you have
And the
4
public-
together, you have created a quorum and you're a meeting.
And the public can come in.
Correct.
We can't forbid the public to come in. So I don't know that then you've got a workshop if you've got the 7 of us and the public coming in every time we try to have a meeting to just try and iron this out. It kind of
But she said
catch
that even
22.
the subcommittee meetings, the public can come in, so no matter what, the public's invited to come in.
Yeah, we are a public agency, so we're open
Right.
to the public. We don't do
So
anything.
it's always,
Would we be able to have a meeting and call it a executive session meeting?
Absolutely not.
This
It
does
doesn't
not-
meet the criteria for an executive session. It's very, very limited reasons you can call executive sessions. And
So when we meet with our attorneys, that's an
that's usually
allowed-
because you have pending litigation going on. Pending litigation or potential litigation's a reason to hold an executive session. Again, there's very few reasons that you can do it under law, and so.
So the
Ours are
goal, the
open.
goal in my mind at the end of the day is for this commission or those who want to participate to come to a certain place at a certain time, hash out our thoughts. Possibly, we can come to some collective resolution that then we can bring to whomever, town council.
Well, no, at that point, you're going to bring it to your Planning and Zoning Commission for a public hearing for a text amendment, right?
Okay.
So that would be, the end goal is to create a new regulation that goes to a public hearing and then allows the public to come in and weigh on it, like any other text
So what I'm
amendment.
hearing
We
is,
did the Housing Commission, we did the Warehouse Committee. I think the model here is the same, except we're bringing in additional people. That's the proposal, at least, as opposed to.
those are three.
I can't make 5:30.
May I make a suggestion? I think what Commissioner Dexter suggested maybe have some value, you know, having one special meeting where it's kind of hyper-focused on the issue and, you know, kind of see where things flush out and then have a subcommittee working on some of those things. But I think the checkpoints coming back to the commission are important so that the subcommittee isn't doing work that's, you know, is off track from the commission. I think it would be workable like that. I mean, you guys tend to talk and work together pretty well together.
So basically, after a subcommittee would meet, they would come back to us on Tuesday night.
You could always have a report, sure. You could have your subcommittee report under your agenda, what's the latest or that kind of thing.
I think the idea would be, you know, the committee would hash things out and maybe come up with a concept or two without going to the trouble of writing the regulation, come back, present the concept. I mean, be very similar to the meeting we had with January, only with a different concept, you know. And then if the commission members give us positive feedback, we go back and actually try to draft the regulation based on the concept. So, you know.
If that's something you want to try to keep in line with the dates that we set here, we could aim for the third meeting of September, which is not a regular meeting, have a special meeting that night to have the commission give the ideas, and then the subcommittee could start the following week if we put it in place.
Sound good to everybody? Okay, so I guess we got to decide who the third member, you know, we really feel like we want to have three. Is there anyone else who'd?
should you consider, well, since Commissioner Dexter's not here, should you consider who the three people should be after you have that kind of meeting, right? Everybody kind of, when we all meet as a group, kind of flush it out during that time? Who should be on the subcommittee?
I think we want to get moving, but I know she's willing. You're willing? Okay.
Okay, so Mike, Stephanie, and Steve would be the three planning and zoning.
Yeah.
My only other thought was, I don't know if you want to have one or two EDC members. I don't know if you want to have one from each party, or, I mean, that would be the only other addition you might want to make to the.
With who?
The Economic Development Commission. You
Yeah,
have
we
one
wanna-
member. I don't know if you want to invite two members, or if that makes a difference to you or not.
I don't know. I think one, yeah.
So at this point, would you like us to formulate an invitation to the EDC to ask them to
Yeah,
appoint
yeah.
somebody with the framework that we've got here?
Mm-hmm.
More or less? Okay. I'll draft something up that we can take a look at.
And then we need to invite, well, I'll talk to I think we ought to have a Democrat on the council from,
Okay.
so I'll talk to them, and if you're willing, Carolyn, to, yeah, okay. All right.
So nobody from BOE then,
What?
Board of Ed?
Yeah, my thinking there is, we know what we need to know about Board of Ed. No concept that adds students is going to make it through this commission.
Got
So
it. Okay.
we don't need them, we know.
Got it, yeah, no, understood.
Okay. All right. Now I've lost my agenda again. There it is, or somebody's agenda. Okay, any bonds?
No, not tonight.
Any other old business?
I'm going to let Alan and Mike know that you're all set for your conference in September, so you're all signed up, the housing conference.
And we have a new member coming. He hasn't gotten it.
Be with you the next meeting.
Mr. Kupchunas. So, I guess one other thing, we've been kind of focusing on training. So there was a training session that not everyone was able to attend. I listened to the video. I thought it was pretty informative. And then there was a freedom of information and ethics training. If you haven't listened to those, you probably ought to do that. And let Josh know so he can tally that up. Do we know, where we stand in each individual's case? Are there people who are hanging out?
I'll check. I think most of you have completed around 2 hours, but I can email where we stand out to everyone.
Okay. So we're supposed to do 4 every year? Wow. The attorney, the FO, or the training for, when the town attorney came into us, was that only an hour? Okay.
Longer.
Seemed like it went on forever.
I'll double check the record.
We may have put it down as an hour and a half.
It was twice as good.
I think.
It was twice as good as any other training. All right. Any other business? You know what we do when we run out of business, right?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
That's.